All right, good evening, everyone. Well, let's join each other in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excellent. We have all council members present except for Council Members Sandberg and Rayum, who are expected a little bit later in the evening. Don't know for sure what time, but probably within the next hour and a half, I would expect. So first on the agenda is our meeting agenda approval. Any changes?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I have a question that I would like to get an update on the legal fees that the city has incurred and associated staff fees that we've incurred with the latest AGARD appeal before the Growth Management Hearings Board. And I don't know if staff probably doesn't have an answer tonight, but I just wanted to, if council's okay with that, get feedback from staff on that at a meeting coming up.
I'm certainly in support of that. Others? So we have a majority that would like that, Joe. So if you could look into that, maybe let us know at the next meeting we get together, if that's possible, or the earliest convenience to you. Perfect. Anything else for tonight's agenda? How about any committee reports? Nope. All right, so let's jump into a study session, and this is for AB 15075, a council update regarding City Hall art. So we should have a presentation from Kathy Oser, who is our Senior Management Analyst. Kathy, nice to see you this evening.
Hi there. How are you?
Good. Welcome.
Good evening. The council enabled the Bothell Arts Committee in February of 2015 and tasked them with making art recommendations back to you, and you will make the final decision on that art for City Hall. Funding for the art at New City Hall is through the 1% for the Arts program and is currently at $314,000 and $314,884. I'd like to have the chair of the Arts Committee, the Bothell Arts Committee, Vicki Sompe, give you the update as to their hard work and their progress to date.
Great. Thank you. Hi, Vicki.
Hi, how are you guys?
Welcome, welcome.
Okay, we started meeting basically in March, and we've worked hard to determine a sound process for recommending art to the City Council, as well as a recommendation for the public involvement in the arts process. That's really been critical to what we felt was important about this process. The committee consists of Warren Weber, Pat Pierce, Michelle Weddle-Dick, Lynn Osman, and myself, Vicki Sompe. Initially, we spent time, actually the first couple of weeks, reviewing how other cities locally and across the country did this process. Then we developed our own criteria with a key focus on the impact of community relevance and participation. We worked also on developing criteria for the art selection that would be both reliable and reproducible going forward. Key to the process, though, has been to provide solutions that weren't static and involved participation from the community on several levels. So given this criteria, we reviewed the project plans and the building itself by doing a couple of walkthroughs and determined that determine the scope of our actual palette and the physical available space for art. To maximize the potential of community participation, we pretty much set upon the use of a digital gallery because this potential would provide us with the broadest platform for citizens and organizations in the city to participate. With regard to the presentation of the historic photos, which is where this idea was generated from, we've acquired 600 digitized photos and the accompanying text. They are all related to the history of Bothell. They are divided into groups: logging, farming, schools, events. And these catalogs represent the body of work that we can use for the digital presentation. If you just think about it for a moment, 15 seconds on the screen, over time. We're talking about a 3 to 4 hour slideshow of continuous loop. Okay, that's a continuous loop of one entity. However, the digital gallery provides us with the ability to have several other entities besides that. So it also uniquely facilitates our being able to really see visibly our archive of historic photos. The format also allows us to update and increase the archive of historic photos in the community. By having this available, we hope to basically beat the bushes and get more historic photos to digitize and have in the future. This would be presented in the video format in the City Hall foyer public areas. This is only one part of the gallery, though. As I just mentioned, groups and city businesses can be invited to provide content to the Arts Committee or appropriate city group to be selected for showing on this digital gallery. To keep it relevant, there's taglines embedded that will be embedded in the top and the bottom of the gallery that would allow for constant streaming if there's announcements or other information that needs to go forward when a presentation is taking place. So it is multifaceted. Future content can be solicited from businesses, schools, colleges, and the community at large for viewing by everyone. Okay, there is a small area, and it is really pretty small, for temporary gallery space where we can do physical two-dimensional art in several formats. To facilitate this, we will be providing a gallery rail at the top of the wall just below the ceiling grid. This will allow and facilitate hanging art for temporary show basis. It also be and this will also be the provided behind the staff areas where the staff seating is in the open business office area. That gallery area will be for provided, how to explain, photos, larger format photos of art from Bothell that will be able to be rotated on a seasonal or general basis. This is art that's being provided right now by a call for color photos in Bothell from students at the high school, colleges, and senior center to be submitted electronically, reviewed by the BAC, printed on canvas and stretched on wood for hanging in the new City Hall at the opening. And this is also an ongoing project to provide a catalog of art that can be used not only behind the staff, but in other offices and conference rooms, et cetera, around the city. The intent is to develop a portfolio of photo art that is seasonal, relevant to the community, and shared by all of us. Although we can provide this same art for the conference rooms at this time, we would like to explore the unique possibility of having our local businesses sponsor conference rooms and having the opportunity to have them provide wall murals and framed art that relates to their projects, products, and contributions to the community. They could provide this sponsorship for a period of 3 to 5 years and to a 3 to 5 year commitment, and then have their name on the conference room. This would provide a little bit of a change from having a Rainier room, a Mount Baker room, a Puget Sound room, etc. We want something a little bit unique that fits our community and gets our businesses involved. Once we have a better idea of a landscape design, we've been presented with a couple different ones, and partly because of that, we're not holding off on a decision, but it would be really nice to know exactly what we're dealing with in the outside courtyard, because that's where we have the opportunity for the three-dimensional art and something of a little bit more whimsical character. We know that the landscape will have the relationship with a river, so we are looking for sculptures large enough for children to sit on, touch, that would relate to the water features, maybe be in the water features, maybe be outside part of it. These could include turtles, otters with their kits, children wading in the water as statues, not necessarily the kids. And we have found several wonderful Northwest artists who do a great job at this type of public sculpture. And we're very excited about the interactive aspect of our courtyard art.
I'm going to jump in and ask a question, if you wouldn't mind. The City Kitty bronze sculpture, what is that all about? I've not seen a picture. Kind of curious.
City Kitty was the cat that adopted City Hall and was in turn adopted by City Hall employees.
Is it going to be encased in the bronze sculpture?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. So I've not heard about the City Kitty. That is news to me. When did the City Kitty pass away?
Is anybody here who was? I mean, I remember hearing about City Kitty and knowing it was there, but I don't know all the particulars. And what we've kind of looking at doing is trying to incorporate City Kitty into some of the sculptural art in relationship to the river, where you have kids, you have dogs, cats. I mean, there will be some kind of a relationship there, mostly after we know what we're really dealing with and which landscape aspect has been chosen. So we're trying to be flexible. It's kind of hard when you don't know exactly which one you're working with yet.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let me continue on in questions, and we'll open up to the rest of council. When you talk about allowing a few of the businesses, I mean, ultimately, how could we turn down, like, if a certain business wants to name it Safeway Conference Room? Like, that's the idea I heard. It's a local business.
You know, I wouldn't turn them down till I see what they propose to put on the wall.
Yeah, not suggesting.
And how much they want to pay for their naming rights.
What discretion do we have?
I think we have to set that, and that's part of what we want to be involved in.
Mm-hmm. Do you think we would open ourselves, say, if there's a business that we don't think would be appropriate for City Hall, that we would turn down their request? Would we be subject to any legal issues?
I don't know. Those are the kind of things that we'll have to bring up at those times and as we set the criteria.
So by passing this tonight, we're not passing, I guess this is a study session.
This is informational.
Yeah. Okay.
We really wanted to get that particular item out there because it does present a really great opportunity, for instance, with Philips, with some of the other companies, the biotech companies, and for that matter, what's Safeway doing? And Safeway does a lot of donations to public causes in our community.
We love Safeway.
And
we shop at Safeway. That was just simply an example. I was just thinking, what if Beehive Espresso or something like that? Maybe it was not a family-friendly business. Are we subject because they put a request in that we're now subject to? We chose not to go with them. So something to take into consideration. Let other council members, anybody else have questions at this point? Councilmember Lamb?
Vicki, thank you. I really enjoyed reading the package, and I really appreciate the time that you and other citizens took to serve on this committee, because I think it's neat to have, this is a building that's going to be the people's building, and I think it's fantastic that you have put such a premium on transparency and reaching out to the community to see what they would like. I actually really liked I really like the idea, and I originally was kind of resistant to it, but of having the digital display where you can incorporate, because I think it means that people in our city who are visiting it will have an access to a much broader spectrum of the visual history of the city of Bothell, and there are just some fantastic old photographs and things that depict how our city has changed. So I really like the idea. I don't really remember ever seeing City Kitty, but I do remember seeing the food bowl in the water for some time, and I think I might have seen him or her once or twice, but I think it's neat that we'll be able to incorporate that into it, and I appreciate the work that you guys have done. I guess I have some similar questions on the idea of the business naming rights for the conference room, but I think those are things that we can explore with council as we move forward. But I really appreciate the work that you guys have done.
Thank you, and I would really appreciate the council's input on that and the exploration of that idea. I have seen it in different venues, and I think it has potential, but it also brings the businesses into our community. There's a lot of resources out there. I would fully anticipate that some of them would like to have their digital 5-minute, 10-minute talk about what they do in our community and what they're trying to do in their research or development. Mm-hmm. And the digital display, in a way, think of it as I don't want to say a mini version of what the Gates Foundation has, but in scope, it is a mini version.
Yeah.
But we have a small space to put it in, and it was a way of being the least impactful on the walls. Mm-hmm. So
I think you struck a nice balance.
Evans?
Yes, thank you. I enjoyed reading the material too, and the ideas that you're coming up with. Having worked with public arts programs, it can be a challenge.
It can be a challenge
for a lot of reasons that have been stated here and many others. So it's interesting. I think you guys have done a great job. Quick question: was there something on the tile wall? I wasn't sure if that's been finalized yet, or
the tile wall would essentially be a permanent type of thing, and we're trying to resist anything that is a permanent fabric adhered to the building. Okay. And I'm going to take that a step further and discuss just briefly something that came up yesterday, and it was a request for ideas for covering the columns. And you had 5 people looking at each other really quickly like, but there's 3-dimensional things that can happen. They can be temporary. Think about the trees that had the stockings on them on 527 for a while. We can do art, fabric art, and even glass sculpture that can be mounted on the columns for temporary exhibits. But if we come in and do tiles, even, art tiles solicited through the community, and put those on the walls, they become a permanent exhibition. I would recommend that we are not against that, but that they be things that can be hanging on the temporary gallery wall.
right. And there again, it's great to have the public involved, and but again, you raise that issue of what's acceptable to some may not be acceptable to others, and it's just a real challenge in a public facility. And I didn't know about the City Kitty either. It looks like that's going to be a commissioned project or something.
The sculpture art would be commissioned, and we've been kind of going through catalogs, looking for artists, particularly local artists.
And I guess I think this is a great start for us for arts in our community and things. And as I mentioned when we passed the 1% for the arts issue, having worked with an arts commission before, I would hope at some point this council develops an arts commission as another board in the city that we use, because it's good to have that advisory board of people, and then we look more towards commissioning art. There are some fabulous artists out there. There's the process has been established well throughout the area of how you commission a piece, and you set out some guidelines for what you're looking for, what may be, this is what the plaza may look like. Come back with your ideas, artists, and then you select, for 2 or 3 finalists and give them a stipend, and they bring back a model to you, and you finally decide on a piece of public art. So I think art in our community is another part of the quality of life that we want to provide for our residents and things.
Exactly.
And with our growing Parks and Recreation Department, and hopefully our arts programs will grow there. I think it's an educational process, too. I would really hope at some point that this council can look towards forming an arts commission, just like our other boards, advisory boards that we have, because I think we have some great resources, some great people that we could serve on that, and then really take our art to the next level. This is a great start, but there's a lot of opportunities in this area. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you and the commission, your board, for all of the work that you've done. The one of the questions I had was on the digital display. What's the projected lifespan of those monitors, and so are we going to need to keep a fund for replacement on those in case something happens? And so, has there been any research done on that?
Yeah, the projected lifespan of those is about 10 years.
About 10 years?
Yeah,
Okay.
about 10 years.
So we're going to at least need to start thinking about creating a capital line for those. Okay. And then the city kitty is, how big is it? Is it going to be done from photos of the actual cat, or I'm just curious.
Probably not from photos of the actual cat, since none have come forward.
Okay.
And as
what-
far as size, we haven't got to that point. We have seen some sculptures of cats, and we've seen some that we quite like. They range from kitties standing up and reaching to kitties sleep and curled up that would look wonderful on top of a basalt rock, just out of reach. In other words,
Right.
It's a very fluid
Okay.
aspect right now.
All right. And I agree with Councilmember Evans that this is I would be also in full support of creating a commission in the future, as well as expanding the art in the city. Let it grow and continue out, especially as we do economic redevelopment in other parts of the city here in the near future. So I'm very supportive of doing that. So, but thank you for all your work.
And thank you.
Councilmember Agnew.
Again, thank you for all the work that you're doing. I love the idea of the otter. I live on the river, and there are otters in the river, and they're a joy to watch. So I'd definitely be supportive of that. The other thing I had a question about is any of this going to be interactive, to where kids could come in and go through some pictures and learn a little bit and touch a screen and go to another screen, or?
We don't have room.
Okay.
It's I have to say that the wonderful aspects of doing that in a children's museum or down at the Science Center is just something we physically don't have room for. However, we do have room in the courtyard for, by having the sculptures that we are looking at be of a size that kids can stand on them, sit on them, stand next to them, touch them, and interact in those ways. One of my favorite group of sculptures is the ducks in Boston. And you never see that in the park without kids on every single one of them. And that's something we don't have here that Kirkland has a great deal of. And the kids interact with the sculptures over there. And my kids have when they were little. So I'm looking forward to that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thanks.
Great. We actually have just 8 more minutes on this, so I'm going to give everybody a chance to go around one more time because I want to. Was there ever any consideration of maybe statues of firemen, policemen, or those who protected us, like in the military?
Not at this time, because we simply don't really have the budget to engage at that level. To be really honest, in our discussions, we are looking forward beyond what we have budget for now, as well as some of the people on the committee are on other arts committees in the city. And we have some other projects that we'd like to do that include full-size statues. So.
Yeah, I mean, I see that there's a remaining $136,000 budget after what is spent on the living green wall and then the items you presented tonight, and then you're talking about the whimsical art. I really have some serious issues with spending $5,000 on a bronze sculpture of a cat. I'd rather spend money on recognizing people who've given considerable protection to us and putting their lives on the line every day. That's where I would love to go, and love if council was interested in that, or if you want to make that investment in a bronze sculpture. I know that people love cats. We have 2 in our house, but they are wonderful pets. If we could recognize those who have protected us in our city, that's where I'd love to go. And I'm wondering with $136,000 if that allows us to give that recognition.
At this point, I honestly don't know, because we're still, once we've settled on our digital wall format, we now have to deal with the software integration of the photos to the format.
Yep.
And we're basically looking at how the budget is panning out. So we have a hierarchy of budgetary requirements, as you guys know.
Yeah. What's interesting is, this is somewhat off subject, but Deputy Mayor mentioned the setting aside money for TVs. 10 years ago, some of these TVs were like $10,000. Now they're $500 at Costco. I wonder where we'll be in 10 years from now. Who knows? But anybody else want to last comment as you've had thoughts? Yeah, Deputy Mayor.
So in the conference room sponsorship, I think it would, I guess I would recommend the committee look more into that as to, and possibly with the city attorney, just to get a feel for requirements and all, so that, because we don't want to be put in a position where there's a lawsuit brought to the city because somebody didn't get it or something like that. So I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just saying we need to vet out all the
Exactly.
potential issues. So, but other than that, thank you for all your work, and look forward to seeing you again and getting more feedback from you.
Okay.
Great. Bill?
And Mayor, just to respond to your comments about the public safety, I mean, we have public safety buildings in the city that, you know, there could be art pieces go in as part of those buildings, whether or not they have to be on this campus or not. And again, that's what an arts commission can do. It can set out these guidelines of what is appropriate and what you're looking for, and and you don't have to spend all the money right now. I mean, there's things that are going to come up. So I hope an arts commission is something we look at. I think it will be helpful then let them develop some of the recommendations to the council as to how this stuff is done, because I think we have a lot of input from those boards and commissions.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Other sculptures could go in other buildings that we have in the city. This is the Civic City Center. So at the heart of the city should be the heart of who we are as a city. So anyway, thank you, everyone, for your comments. Vicki, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Kathy, thank you. Moving on to the next item on our agenda is a study session regarding the traffic impact and concurrency considerations for Juanita and East Riverside Drive corridors. We have a presentation or staff with us for Sherman Gong and Stephen Morikawa. Councilmember Lamb.
Mr. Mayor, I wanted to, I raised this question with the city manager earlier, and I think he indicated that there was some conversation about this. My understanding of what council's direction was is that we wanted to have a citywide look at what our choke points were in the city, and clearly some of these are amongst those. But to my mind, and I'm interested in hearing the presentation on these items tonight. I read the packet with interest, but before we expended money, I'd like to have staff do an analysis of citywide of where those corridors are that have it. I mean, there's a lot of different places in our city. We spend a lot of attention on one particular area of our city, but I think we're a big city, and I know 228th has an enormous problem, and I don't want to spend money here and not spend. I think we should ask our staff, what are the worst choke points in our city right now? Maybe it is these. Maybe it's not. Maybe we have different ones. So that was my understanding of what our request to staff was. This is a little bit more narrowly focused, and I'm interested in hearing the presentation. But in terms of moving forward, that's what I thought we were asking for before, and what I would support moving forward.
Yeah, actually, I was surprised not to see 228th in here because Councilmember Evans specifically mentioned it. So we can hear staff presentation first, and then we go into a little bit more conversation about where we go. Do you have a presentation?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right. Council members, Mayor Freed, thank you for the time to discuss this. In response to the comments and questions raised during the recent council meetings. I just wanted to give you a brief presentation about concurrency corridors methodology and specifically how the impact of it is to the Waynita Way and East Riverside corridors. We understand that there's some congestion on these corridors right now, and primarily just during the peak hours, but concurrency really may not be the answer that we think would solve this problem, and they may actually create other problems that require you to meet concurrency requirements that you may want to do. So we're going to recommend some alternative approaches, and that's what we want to talk about a little bit as well. So first off, why does the city have concurrency? It is a requirement of the Growth Management Act, and it's the primary tool that we use to monitor the city's key roadways. And those arterials being the primary function is mobility, which is really moving traffic in and out of the city. That's for residents as well as pass-through traffic. It's also the way that we make sure that development is mitigating their traffic impacts through either roadway improvements or traffic impact fees. So how are the concurrency corridors designated? They require a city council approval. They are generally the major gateways that are already classified as a principal or a minor arterial. And the volumes on these corridors are at least 15,000 vehicles a day, with most of them reaching over 25,000 up to almost 40,000 vehicles a day. And another key characteristic is that the majority of the intersecting cross streets are with arterials or other collectors, and they're controlled by traffic signals on these corridors. So why don't we designate all city streets as a concurrency corridor? They're frankly not all city streets are equal importance when it comes to mobility. A lot of streets are actually made more for accessibility, which is the collectors and the local street system. And frankly, we don't have the resources to ensure that all streets operate equally well. So, mobility is not the primary function for a lot of the city streets. They are to, get people onto the system and to that arterial system. That's the accessibility part. And mainly the critical streets are the ones that we need to maintain the capacity, which is what concurrency is about, is to maintain capacity and to make sure that that traffic flow is working on major city arterials. So we've heard a lot of discussion about Waynita Way and that corridor and what is happening on that. The corridor, as we're defining it, is really from 522 to Northeast 145th Street. And those two particular intersections at the terminus are the two signalized intersections on the corridor. There are no other signals in this corridor. There's adequate capacity on this corridor already. Traffic flows through it from one intersection, from one of those signalized intersections to the other fairly easily. And under the concurrency guidelines that we use right now, we wouldn't have any level of service problems, and it would meet the standard as it's defined today. The specific concerns on this corridor are really related to accessibility, as I just talked about, and not capacity. So, all of these, there's no through streets on this. There aren't any through streets on this corridor at all. Every street comes from a neighborhood or goes back into a neighborhood. It doesn't connect to any collectors or arterials at all. So what we really need to address is the intersection approach to SR 522. That's where the biggest problem is right now. So some of the things that we are suggesting in terms of an analysis to identify solutions or improvements to address that initially is to look at signal operations at those signal intersections to optimize the green time the traffic flow, optimize that, and see if we can fine-tune that using a more detailed analysis rather than just a level of service criteria analysis as in a concurrency mode. We want to look at traffic gap availability for the side streets. If there's not enough gaps, then you're waiting can we improve that by adding some turn lanes so that you can make a two-step maneuver into the arterial? We'll look at level service for the cross-street intersections to identify, how they really are working. Are they at a level of service, a poor level of service or not? What's the actual delay for some of the critical key intersections? And then look at sight distance clearance to make sure that, it's already tough enough to find a gap in the traffic flow. I don't want to have to look through a bush or a fence post or something else that's really blocking me and making my decision process a little harder. And finally, we want to look at some signal warrant analysis to make sure that, if that is what is needed, then we want to make sure it meets the warrants, and that would be those critical intersections could help to get those people out of there. So looking at this type of analysis, we're looking at an estimated cost between $20,000 to $25,000. The 102nd East Riverside corridor, again, not clearly defined, but we're looking at it from a standpoint of the intersection of 102nd and Main Street, basically down to East Riverside Drive and out to Brickyard Road. That's kind of a defined corridor, if you will. Again, there's capacity is adequate on this corridor. Traffic can move from one end to the other fairly easily until you get to the intersection of Main Street and 102nd. Again, it's a peak hour issue. The primary problem is the northbound approach coming over the bridge and into downtown is, it's congested for, short period of time during the PM peak hour. Doesn't occur probably for all day, but that's something that we will look at. In the AM peak hour, it's actually people trying to get southbound on this bridge and coming from probably, 3 directions, if you will, to this intersection, waiting their turn to get through the intersection. The majority of the traffic, we'd like to probably think it's going to be, they're all coming into downtown and shopping and everything, but most likely it's not. It's most likely a lot of pass-through traffic, bypassing I-405, and other main gateways into the city. A study that was conducted in 2009 looked at this intersection and downtown and traffic flow here, and determined that adding a signal at this location would only push this traffic to the next controlled intersection, moving that queue into the downtown somewhere else. And at that time, public feedback from the downtown business owners didn't support adding a traffic signal here. They didn't want to see traffic just moving through downtown. So, there's a special place downtown Bothell is, and it's pedestrian friendly. It's got an atmosphere to it that is conducive to the way it's controlled now for traffic. So potentially adding a concurrency designation to this may not solve the problem, may even change the character of downtown. You're making it a thoroughfare rather than a destination. So again, some additional analysis that we could actually look at, or some alternative analysis, is to review the downtown and the traffic mobility and operations for it right now. Back in the 2009 study, one of the recommendations was to relook at this after we've completed all of our major corridor, major construction projects. At this point in time, I think staff has basically decided that those major improvements have been done, and the traffic patterns are pretty much where we want them to, where we expect them to be. The other thing we could look at again is level of service at the key intersections, and make sure that we're not missing something there in terms of delay and problems at the key intersections, either in downtown or along the East Riverside Drive. I think a key thing that we would want to do here is to look at the travel demand model and conduct an origin destination study. This will identify primarily where the people are originating, coming into this corridor, up into downtown, and then where they're going. And if we understand that, we could look at the traffic flow patterns and maybe make those specific movements work a little bit better. And again, finally, just to conduct a signal warrant analysis to make sure that if we're looking at, adding a signal someplace that it is warranted and is safe to install. Estimated cost for these improvements is $30,000 to $40,000. So, just to recap, concurrency is a tool that we could use, but it may not resolve all the access issues on those two corridors or anywhere else if we're looking at it to make it a concurrency corridor. The other approaches we would like to study, but there's no funding identified for them right now. And at this time, staff is seeking council direction on either to pursue those studies, and if so, finding some funding to be appropriated for it. We can staff, if council elects to direct staff to do that, we will explore funding options and bring them back for council consideration at the mid-biennium budget amendment cycle at the end of the year.
Great, thank you, Chairman. I'll jump in first. Do you have a map of the 100th Avenue?
100th Avenue, yeah. Let me go back.
We need a.
Yeah,
Yep.
right here. So,
Oh,
can you, this is 522 up here.
I wish we could look at the intersection itself and really
Oh.
zip down on it. What I've always found curious is, as you're coming, let's say you're turning south from, coming from downtown Bothell past Yakima Fruit Market.
Yep.
There's two lanes that turn left in, and then
Correct.
those two lanes immediately become one lane. But there's like never congestion there. Most congestion is as you approach the light from the south. Would it be possible to take one of those lanes away that you're turning into and make it an additional turn lane, so then it's freeing up 2 lanes of traffic to the left and 2 to the right?
We need those 2 southbound lanes because you have a double left turn lane and you need that merging distance to accommodate that before. So converting it probably wouldn't work. As far as the intersection goes, you're talking about adding lanes at the intersection?
I'm talking about
Northbound?
using the lanes that are currently there so we don't have to spend more money to widen it, but I don't ever see that those 2 lanes that are turning south are stacked up to 10 cars even. And Tom, answer, but you'll see 50 car or 40 cars or whatever the number would be heading north, and if I'd be willing to sacrifice one of those south heading lanes for one that would allow 2 turns to the left and potentially 2 to the right to relieve that congestion immediately. So that's one thought. Another one is if you go down to Eastside Forest Court Church, come to that intersection, one of the most frustrating things,
Down here.
I mean, 41 years I lived there, and really the last 12 years or whatever it's been, as I'm heading south and want to turn left on 145th, you can't, because there's those darn medians that block you. So what people do is they go through the church instead, and you see, if you're sitting at the light, 2 cars per light will end up going through the church. But if you remove those medians, it would allow people to be able to stack up in those and be able to take a left lane. Because as you get to 6 cars, before you get to that median, you've stopped any left turn hand movement. So that'd be a pretty cheap issue to allow people to finally turn left. And I would be surprised how much improvement that could bring for very little money. So those are my 2 thoughts. Dell has all the solutions for 102nd Street. Next.
Well, I think just to respond to you there real quick, Josh, that the looking at turn lanes, additional turn lanes where, there's volume for key intersections. I think that's, one of the suggestions we're looking at here. The intersection at 522 and we need those improvements were done based on traffic models that were, looking at long-term, solutions, I know. So
Yeah.
that's something that, again, it would be a focused analysis at that intersection.
What do you think of my idea about the one by Eastside Foursquare? It's pretty good.
If that's what you like, we can maybe take a look
check
at
it
that,
out.
too.
See what you think. Tom?
You were talking about looking at the traffic light at 522 coming up from Wayneita Way, and I would concur with the mayor that we also need to look at the light at 145th. In the morning, if you're traveling southbound, it's going to be at least 3 lights before you get through it. If you're traveling northbound at night, it's going to be a minimum of 2 lights before you get through it. So we need to look at something in both those directions. I think the traffic, and this is just my speculation, I think the traffic's going to increase with the tolling of 405. That's the only north-south road we have. I agree with Councilmember Lamb that we also need to look at 228th and some of the other areas that are congested. But those are my two concerns about that road.
Sherman, I was going to ask you, have we seen a discernible uptick in traffic since 520 was told on the 522? Because I know we predicted that we were going to see a lot, or we thought that we might see a fair amount on 522. Since 520 was told, we thought a lot of people would come down 522. Instead, since that time, did we see a discernible uptick in traffic? I thought that we saw some, but not as much as we maybe had feared.
My understanding is about 12% increase in traffic, and that's pretty good for over the time we've had tolling.
Yeah.
But in general, I can looking at the traffic volumes themselves, specific locations, not very much. And that's pretty much kind of a national trend. Is not like the 2% growth that we're used to seeing.
Right.
It's actually lower than that now.
And then going to 228th for a second, and I know this wasn't part of the presentation, and I guess that would be my request. I'd like to come back and say, I understand Councilor Agnew lives in the area by Waynita. I live in the area by 228th. I think we know the areas that we drive in the city, but I'd like to have staff take a holistic look at the city and say, are there other choke points where council members don't live that might be worse or in need of attention as well? And I would agree with you on the approach of concurrency. I think presents more challenges than opportunities in this instance. With respect to 228th, is it true that we're going to be adding a stop light at the exit to the business park on 228th?
At 29th and 228th,
Yeah,
correct.
28th,
That's a
okay.
project that's in the works right now.
It's in the works. Okay. I would like to see 228th analyzed, and I guess before we spend money on this, I'd like to kind of have you guys take a higher level look at the entire city and what our choke points are, so that when we spend taxpayer money, we're doing it on the most in the areas of the city that are most impacted, and not necessarily just the ones that we happen to notice because of where we live.
There's a couple of, just for your information, on 228 specifically. We have the intersection improvement
Right.
at 228, 527, and we also have a project coming on board at 19th and 228th to convert that into what we call a flying T intersection.
Okay.
So that would aid in the operations of
No, I think that's a
So
big
it's-
help, and I know. I mean, a lot of it is just traffic that's coming from unincorporated Snohomish County that's pouring down in there, and frankly, a lot of it is not even connected with residential development. It's just connected with the fact that Boeing now. When the Boeing people moved into the business park, it changed a lot the traffic patterns in the morning. It went from being really it's dramatically, which is a good thing. We have more jobs in the city, but there's a lot more people pouring into especially the Canyon Park Business Park in the morning. So those are my two comments.
Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Evans?
Yes. Do we have any level F conditions in the city? I just
believe-
reading your report, it looks like level
I can look.
E is, or LOSE is,
I don't think we have any intersections right now that are currently operating at level service F.
okay.
There are some that are probably approaching that, and 228, 527, but none that are operating at F at this point that I'm aware of.
So, are these the two most difficult traffic challenges we have in the city? These two projects, or 986 and East Riverside Drive we've talked about?
I would say no, but
Okay. So that's what I was thinking. But I understand where you live is where you see the issues, and I was coming in tonight, and on 240th, between 35th and 39th, they were backed up the entire block, waiting to make a right-hand turn going north on 35th. So, and I can see it in the morning coming that other way. It's backed up going southbound. So,
right.
I guess I agree with Councilmember Lamb that these are concerns, and they've been expressed by the neighbors, and I think we ought to look at them, but I think we ought to look at the city as a whole first, and I am assuming staff has probably already done this. Staff, if you had to rank the top 5 priorities and traffic issues in the city that need to be resolved, you probably know what those are today, I would think.
I think I have a good idea.
Yeah.
They're,
I don't know if I want to put you on the spot and ask you to quote them or not, but that's, you know, I do think it's an issue that we need to look globally first and then try to zero in. And the interesting thing is we all want to get where we're going as quick as we can, and it's frustrating when we have traffic and things. And we talk about mitigation fees to mitigate traffic impacts and things, but mitigation doesn't pay the total cost of the impacts. Is that true?
That's right. It's,
I mean,
typically for, projects of capacity nature, there's going to be some other funding sources that are going to go towards those projects.
I mean, we have park impact fees, we have traffic mitigation fees, and those fees never totally offset the impact that's being generated. They're there. You do, when a project is developed in the city, they can be required to improve their frontage improvements and those types of things, but there's other impacts, and all that's figured in. So I guess we're living in an area that is, we received a letter tonight from somebody who was concerned about the traffic in the city and things, and we're living in a developing area that is getting more busy, and that's what the Urban Growth Management Act says, is that this density is supposed to occur within the I-5 and I-405 corridors and things along there, and that's what's happening, and I think we need to do our best to mitigate that as much as possible, but it's going to get busier, and we're going to be able to solve some of these things and improve some of these things. There's been some good suggestions tonight, but the fact is it's getting busier, and we'll probably get busier. So I agree. I think we need to, before I want to commit to any particular project yet, I'd like to see, and like again, probably the staff already has this in mind, so if you could just give us a memo that says here are what we see as the top 5 priority issues in traffic, or however you have them ranked or whatever, and take a look at that. I don't know if we need to go out and hire a consultant to do that. I'm sure staff knows what those are. Bring that back to us, and then from there we can decide, where do we start allocating our funds, and realizing that funding is tight, we can do as much as we can, but let's look at the big picture and then narrow down on the smaller projects as we go. Thank you.
Thanks. Deputy Mayor?
Great, thank you. Sherman, earlier you said that with the level of completion of projects in the downtown area, there's a traffic pattern established that you feel comfortable with. But the boulevard isn't complete yet. How much will the completion of the boulevard change those traffic patterns as far as, the bigger picture?
Well, I think because there's already the final capacity that's on the boulevard, you're talking about 520, the multi-way boulevard, correct? You're talking about that section. So there are the final improvements really to add the auxiliary lanes on there. Really is not really to add capacity. It's more of just accessibility and function for that corridor. And right now the highway or that section of road already has the ultimate capacity. It's going to have the 2 lanes in each direction. So I don't think that it's going to change the traffic pattern. That is a pretty designated corridor that people are using, that expect to use it, and
doesn't the 2 lanes go further north than it currently does in a completed project?
Yeah, but I think what's really happening is from about 190th to 240th Safeway, where we have 1 lane, that's kind of metering everything into downtown. So we are going to go 5 lanes, and that'll help us get people through the intersections quicker because we have double lefts and everything. But until we actually fill in that gap between Safeway and 190th, that's kind of metering the flow coming down that hill.
Okay. And then on East Riverside Drive, would adding or changing the bridge for the trail to one that could handle emergency vehicles be helpful in access to that south side at all, or would that be an area that we would want to consider adding a bridge for just general traffic flow to get to 522, as opposed to going up and over 102 to Main and then either east to Kaysner or west to the Boulevard and south to 522? Is there been any consideration of putting a bridge there to help relieve some of that 102 traffic?
I'm not aware of any capital projects that are looking at additional crossings of the bridge at this point, but
And I think that partly goes to the realm of how far and how much we think we can spend. So we think there are solutions on 102nd Avenue corridor that could help. And as an example, rather than bring people into downtown, get them onto 522, like an on-ramp or something like that. But you're really talking a lot of money at that point. We're trying to get a few more years out of that bridge, and then at some point we have to replace that, and I think that's probably a great time to open that door, because we're going to be spending quite a bit of money at that time. Similarly, at 228th and Bothell Highway, this next project we're going to have is at the last left turn lane, northbound. And then we're pretty much done from a two-dimensional point of view of what we can do with that intersection, and if we really want to take care of that intersection, we start getting into more expensive solutions, grade separations and things like that. And those are things we actually do have in a 6-year tip right now that we're not funding, studies to look at that and what the next step would be. So we can certainly look at those and put them in some sort of priority. In other words, we could look at a long-term costly solution, and also we can have interim solutions that are more affordable in the near term. I think that's part of the study.
All right. And then I would have to agree with Council Members Lamb and Evans that I think we need to come back with a citywide holistic view of all of our problem areas in a rank order. Again, I'm with Councilmember Lamb. I thought that's originally what we were going to get was this overview of the city and our problem areas. So that's what I would like to have come back. Because 228th is a major concern there. As well as the at 527, but also as well as to the east from there also. So thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Councilmember Sandberg and Rayum. Do you have any comments on this? It sounds like it will be coming back to us maybe as a little bit wider look at the city than to focus back down on where we have roads with issues. Yeah. Do you want to go first? Go for it.
Sorry for being late, and I didn't see your presentation. So I had a couple quick questions. So the city of Bothell analyzes the traffic level of service on designated corridors to measure concurrency, and it says Bothell has adopted LOS, level of service E, and then I read level of service E, and it sounds pretty bad. So I was just curious to why is that, and is that normal for cities our size to choose that level of service?
it actually is because it's there's a balance of, you can go to one extreme and have level of service D, for example, or one level below, which is a little bit better, or C even for that matter, and basically you would cut off development because nobody can get to that level of improvements to get that type of traffic movement going. So, a lot of jurisdictions as well as ourselves, we've adopted level service E, not even at an intersection level, but as a corridor, because there's a balance of maybe some locations are, we can accept level of service E during peak hour operations, but, from one point of a corridor to another, that's really what we're trying to keep moving. We're trying to keep that traffic going. So maybe one intersection, we have a little tougher problem, it's okay. So we can go with level of service E.
So that's why we do E, because during the busy times of the day, that's when you don't want to go below that. You don't want to have your level of service. Is there an F?
There is a level.
There's an
of
F.
Nobody.
I like the grade.
Well, I can tell you, even in the past, the city of Bothell did accept level of service F at one time when it was an intersection-based level of service, concurrency. But, we had to move away. We moved away from that because you couldn't get anything done. You couldn't make that improvement. Didn't make sense to do it that way.
So then I was just curious about the statement that says, also note that mobility can come at the expense of providing multiple access points for land use. And that just flew right past my head. I didn't understand that sentence.
So what that means is, what we're trying to say there is that to allow that traffic flow for the major corridors, sometimes you have to, at the expense of, a side street or driveways. We're not going to, we just can't provide equal opportunity for those people to come out onto the arterial system, because the major function of that road is mobility, is to move traffic. And, during a couple, 15, 20, 30 minutes of the day, peak hour, you got to wait. You just have to, it's just a consequence of allowing the bigger issue, which is to move traffic along. That's all it means.
Thank you. So just so I'm certain, the map of concurrency corridors and intersections, that's in the capital facilities plan, or I'm sorry, the comprehensive plan, right? And
Yes.
But it wasn't labeled that, so I just wanted to make sure I had the right maps. Is that,
Yes,
that was part
same
of your
one.
presentation?
Same one. TR 3A and 3B as the concurrency.
Okay.
That one there.
Where it had the 2014 and then 2030.
There's a 2035 equivalent to it. Yes.
Okay. So I thought that was really informative for people if they were interested to see. I mean, it really is like the grading system in school, but it has an E in there.
And I just wanted to clarify too. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
You asked a question of their low service F locations, and I should have clarified a little bit. There aren't any at the concurrency intersections that we're analyzing, Bill, but there may be like level service F intersections for unsignalized. It's a different system of grading it. So just a point of fact for you. Well, I remember that. Yeah. Sorry, Andy. Go ahead.
It's okay. I didn't know how much time I was supposed to take.
We all have about 3 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Or so.
Killed that.
Yeah, we had only 30 minutes for this. We had a presentation, maybe a little bit longer than that, but we kind of allocated it before both of you arrived, and so it was probably 5 minutes we each had. But ultimately, if you just want to take 2 more minutes, and then we'll
Okay.
hand it over to Councilmember Sandberg.
So for the 102nd Avenue Northeast East Riverside Drive corridor, did the modeling for 2035 account for the tolling? And is there a way to do that in the model? Because I won't be using 405 to go to Redmond once it's tolled.
I'm going to let our consultant, Don Samdahl, answer that for you.
Good evening, Don Samdahl with Fair and Peers. The travel model generally assumes the tolling on 520 and the express toll lanes that are coming on I-405, and it doesn't do a great job of showing all the traffic shifts on some of the city streets, but it is reflected in there. So I'm sure there's some of that effect that you're seeing out there now.
Yeah. Thank you. And I didn't hear all the conversation, but I would be curious to know what are the staff's top 10 transportation issues in the city, or top 20, and where do these rank in there? And then I believe, too, the staff recommendation was to move forward with evaluating 100th, but not East Riverside Drive?
No, it was
Okay.
either or both, actually, to move forward to do analysis if that's the direction that you want us to take.
Oh, okay. I thought one of them you said you don't recommend us moving it forward, but one you did.
Didn't recommend going with concurrency, but they thought there might be improvements with intersections, with lighting, timing, and such.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that's all I have for now. Thanks.
Okay.
Councilmember Sandberg?
So there's one quote in the agenda bill that I thought was really illustrative, and it's on page 27 in the agenda packet. And it says the disadvantage of designating these streets as concurrency corridors would be the potential need to require transportation improvements at intersections within the corridor itself to maintain acceptable level of service grades as adopted by the city codes. And I thought that was really interesting, because I guess that's a disadvantage if you're in the position of having to fund those improvements to to make sure that the corridor and the intersections function well. But if you're a resident experiencing that traffic, that would be a reason why you would want your corridor listed as a concurrency corridor. So I think that's where a lot of maybe friction and disappointment or, well, a difference of opinion with what the public is saying versus what staff and the city are saying.
May I respond to that?
Sure.
So I think in the context in which I was given was the East Riverside Drive and the effect on that corridor of basically one intersection is the one that's causing a lot of the problems. That's the Main Street 102nd intersection. And what we're basically saying is, and we're not exclusive of this, many cities do this. When you apply concurrency, you make it a part of your code, and then you're supposed to do something, you have to do something based on the code. One of the concerns we have here, and we heard it when we looked at this intersection in 2009, and we actually did a study and we had public process. The downtown area is kind of special, and people want a certain environment. And some of the traffic, if not a lot of the traffic, coming on 102nd and not necessarily generated in downtown, and maybe not even on East Riverside itself as well. So one of the concerns is if we were to put concurrency there, we would have to put let's say we put a traffic signal there. Well, we've maybe handled the traffic aspect of it, but then we might have ruined the pedestrian atmosphere, the business atmosphere, or the special historic atmosphere. Because with concurrency, you'd have to do whatever you have to do to make it work. You might have to put right turn lanes and the signal there. So what we're saying is you might want to be cautious in the downtown area and make sure you have a balance of what you want your historic downtown to look like versus the performance of the traffic moving through downtown. I think that's a decision that you would probably want to make, balancing what it would do if you just put concurrency on that corridor.
And I understand there's that balance, but since I'm most aware of that particular intersection, and I time that intersection every time I go through it in the PM peak hour, that intersection consistently takes anywhere from 8 to 13 minutes to get through. That's not even on the scale of some of these LOS metrics where we're talking about like 80-second queuing. I mean, we're way beyond 80 seconds with that particular intersection. And I guess I'm not really interested in spending more money in studying that intersection because we've studied it. We know what the problem is. And what that intersection really needs is a traffic light. Something that can move the north-south traffic in those PM and AM peak hours. And you can still maintain that pedestrian feel by having it be a four-way stop non-peak times and then letting the traffic move in peak times.
We actually, that wasn't the result of our study. We couldn't make that intersection all by itself work. We'd have to put lights at least a couple intersections in the downtown. Because once you started controlling that one, you just moved the problem around. So what we found was it's kind of a downtown problem. It's not just that intersection itself. So and then at that point, again, putting multiple traffic lights in there, I think you would want to look at it to make sure you're comfortable putting that amount of traffic signal within your downtown before you just move forward with that.
So what I hear then is the alternative is to take this fatalistic approach.
No,
which
I think
is
our recommendation.
There's no solution besides to study it again.
No, I think we have. I think there are ways we may be able to approach it and make it better. We may not be able to get it level of service D, or we might not get it a perfect performing, but it might be a better balance of what you're looking for.
You missed one of their answers, and you might want to repeat about the bridge.
Oh. So, one of the ultimate solutions is we're getting a lot of people coming through downtown. Whenever you have a river, people look for bridges, and that's a bridge, and there's not very many along the Sammamish River. So they all have to come through downtown. So one of the ways we thought about this a long time ago that you could solve this is essentially try to get people, as an example, if you're coming northbound into the city, And you really got to go through downtown and then go down Kaysner and then go 522 on your merry way. Rather than doing that, put an on-ramp onto 522. People don't even have to come through downtown. That might be the ultimate solution, but it's a very pricey solution. And what we're looking at is, way back when we fixed the bridge a few years ago, it has a certain life on it. And that's probably second or third bridge down the road that we would probably have to replace. And at that point, a very good solution may be to widen that bridge up a little bit and look at doing some of the things like that that actually might really, address it to the level that you're looking for.
We need to wrap up and move on.
Well, I guess I would just say in conclusion, I think it's frustrating that the solutions are all expensive and essentially out of reach in any kind of near-term solution or near-term horizon. And so, but what we say is, well, we can't fix it in the near term, but we're going to continue to allow development to occur because we're not going to classify these as concurrency corridors. And so the problem just continues to build, and the answer is always, well, if we had more money, this is how we would fix it.
Yeah, just as a final response to that would be just that it's not just.
I don't think your mic's on.
Oh, it's,
Oh,
you know?
okay.
Yeah.
Is it on?
Okay.
Sorry.
You're good.
It's, whether you make improvements for development to happen, the traffic is still going to grow, and you're going to get traffic from outside that you still have to account for and make improvements to accommodate or not accommodate. So, it's not just, we're not looking at solutions just to allow development to occur, but, it's kind of it's for the benefit of everybody here, really.
Great. Thanks so much, Tris. Thank you so much for your presentation this evening. Hopefully you got some direction to come back with us sometime in the future.
Yep.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Appreciate it. Next on our agenda is a discussion on the potential RFA terms with our city manager, Bob Stowe.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this is just simply an opportunity for Council to provide some additional guidance to me before we initiate negotiations with what appears to be Woodinville Fire and Rescue and Snohomish 10 Fire District. And so at the previous meeting on May 19th, Council provided a specific term that we wanted to make sure that we'd have discussion about with those entities, but wanted to have some more discussion with Council to make sure that there weren't any other areas of interest that you have now that you've had some time to think about this process. And we've had more information from North Shore Fire District that was recently distributed to the city last week.
Can you get an update so the hearing public can understand that they have withdrawn from the RFA? Is that the right way to term it?
Well, I think that what their letter indicated, their main point was that they were not interested in negotiating with Bothell regarding any of the RFA terms that the council was interested in discussing with them.
Okay, great. Well, who wants to take it off with discussion? Start off. Councilmember Lamb, then Councilmember Agnew.
Thank you, Mayor. I saw the letter from North Shore, and initially North Shore was not part of the RFA conversation, and then they asked to join into the RFA conversation. And I would say that by their statement that they no longer want to negotiate, that concludes the involvement of North Shore, because I don't think it's in the interest of the citizens of Bothell to enter into a financial arrangement with somebody who says they don't want to negotiate. So I think in terms of clarity, as one member of the council, that would be clarity. Is I think the discussion should continue with Woodinville and with Fire District 10. I think the financial parameters that we provided for you still stand. And I think what's left for you to do is to negotiate with them the terms of what that would be in terms of capital improvements to the city of Bothell that would come from the RFA so that we could get a sense of what that agreement would look like. And I think that you're, per the last direction from council, you're empowered to negotiate that and get the best deal that you can from Woodinville. I have to say, as somebody who is intrigued by the possibility of an RFA, I'm actually very encouraged, because I think the merger of Woodinville and Bothell is much, much simpler than the merger of Bothell, Woodinville, and North Shore. Bothell and Woodinville have the same schedule in terms of shifts. They have leadership that I think has a good relationship with the Bothell department. We have a shared fire chief. The compensation level is almost identical between Woodinville firefighters and Bothell firefighters, and I think it's something that makes a potential of a joining of those two things to be much more promising. So my direction, or my belief about the direction of council, would be that you continue the negotiations with those two entities, come back, get the best deal that you can, and then come back to us and make a recommendation as to whether you think that's something that we should move forward with.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Agnew?
This has been a long, drawn-out process. I think one of the reasons North Shore pulled out was they didn't want to negotiate, period, with Bothell. And I don't think it was in a derogatory sense they said that. I think why they said that was that the agencies came together, and to make it financially equitable, the view was for Bothell to contribute 1.5 over 7 years, and that would give them the financial equity that the rest of the agencies are giving in. And when they saw our last council meeting, a couple council meetings ago, they saw that we were trying to negotiate a $750,000 to $1.5 million, and I think it offended them, and I think that's why they withdrew. And that's talking to the chief of the department, and talking to some of the people in the department. I think the 1.5 will bring us into some financial equality. I agree with Councilmember Lamb that it's probably a lot easier to merge with Woodinville and Snow 10, and I think that's still on the packet, and we should still look at that. And we should look at that for a number of reasons. I'm still hopeful that this thing will go through, but it's going to be entirely on us now. Whether we come in and we want it to be financially equitable, and if we don't, I don't know where it'll go. But I think we just need to keep an open mind with that.
Thank you. Councilmember Ram?
If possible, could we hear from the RFA committee members, just kind of their take on the North Shore withdrawal and what that means to, in your opinion, of moving to an RFA?
Yeah, during their comments, they'd like to have that opportunity. Do you want to step back and let
one
of them go first?
I'd rather them go first just because they're a lot closer to this than
Yeah,
the rest
so
of us.
Councilmember Agnew already shared his feelings on why they did. Councilmember Evans or Deputy Mayor or?
Sure. We presented the position that's here tonight in the agenda, that we were willing to take a look at the equity issue and see if we could improve on that, and that by doing so we wanted our city manager to negotiate what that might look like. I'm sure their goal is 1.5 million, which is what we get from any agency that we may be negotiating with. Here's our goal. Here's where we're starting, or maybe that's where they're going to stay. But all we're saying is we're asking the city manager to come in and see, do we automatically go there, or is there some middle ground? So that's the direction that we explained at the meeting, and I didn't really hear the North Shore folks say too much at that meeting. There was some concern that, $750,000, and we said, wait a minute, that's not what we're saying. We're saying there's a range that we've given our city manager to negotiate with. I mean, I think we do that in any contract. We don't, at face value, sometimes accept a contract without discussing it and negotiating that. So that's what we've asked them to do. I think Councilmember Lamb mentioned a couple of things. I think we do align better with Woodinville. I think North Shore has a different platoon. They have, four platoons compared to our 3 platoons. We still train with them and do things with them, but I think they may be looking further to the west to communities to the west to consider being involved with, and that may be what's best for them. But I think that's what we need our city manager to go back and sit down with. So what's going to happen now is there's going to be a representative from Woodinville and a representative from District 10. It's my understanding that we'll meet with our city manager, and our city manager, we've given him some general parameters here to negotiate, and it doesn't mean that there aren't other alternatives here other than funding that something might be able to work out, but it's still worth discussing with Woodinville and see what happens. And the goal is to have those negotiations hopefully try to wrap up by the end of July, so we'll know by then maybe Woodinville will say, yes, this sounds like a good package that Bothell's bringing to the table, or they may say, no, we're going to withdraw too. So, but until we go through that negotiation, we just don't know. And I think that another interesting piece here to me now is as we've gone through the process of looking at our own costs in the city. We've had our fire chief and finance presented a very comprehensive outlook of our needs for the future. And so, what I think we all want is what's best for the taxpayers or the residents of our community, and not only in service but financially what's best for them. So I don't know. If this doesn't work, then now we have an opportunity to look at, well, okay, what can we do within our own community? Because we know costs are going to go up. But what can we do to our costs? Can we make that less than they would be through an RFA? I don't know, But so those are the types of things that we'll get through this first negotiation, depending on what happens. Then we have options to go on from there, as to what to do. At least that's my understanding of kind of where things. I think Woodinville's still interested in talking with us, and it'll be interesting to see in the next few weeks how those negotiations go.
Great, thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Unfortunately, I couldn't be at the last meeting, but just from a history standpoint, I don't know that I've never felt like North Shore's heart was in the whole process to begin with. And as has been mentioned, we align so much more with Woodinville than we do with North Shore. I'm in favor of moving forward, and I want to be an equitable player, partner in this process. So that's, if that means that we have to be on the higher end than the lower end, then that's what it means. And but I think we need to be an equitable player partner through this process. I think that in the long run, big picture, years down the road, this is the right thing for our citizens. I have no doubt about it. The cost of running a fire department, we would have to take from other places in the city to fund it, or we have to continually run levies to properly fund our fire department. And there's a cost in running levies all the time. So I'm in favor of moving forward with this process. I would like to see one of the committee members go in with the city manager and Councilmember Agnew, who sat on the finance committee. He's probably more intimate with the numbers and all and I know he is more so than I am, and Bill probably feels the same way. That I would like Councilmember Agnew to be there also. That way, at least there's an elected representative from all the parties participating, and I also think that's the right thing to do. So, but I truly believe deep down that this is the direction we need to continue to move forward in a positive way, so that we can put it on the ballot to our citizens with full disclosure as to all the finances. If we keep money, where does it go? The whole 9 yards. So, but that's where I'm at.
Great. Councilmember Rayum and then Sandberg.
So I don't know if I can ask you guys questions, but so the other options were, there was an RFA was an option, and then there was annexations, and then forming a district, I think, or contracts. So those other two still aren't attractive with North Shore out of the picture? Would that be a fair statement?
In my mind, I know you asked this question before, and the answer was no, we're working at this, we're still working at the RFA level. But I personally feel that the contracting and annexation should still be in the equation somewhere, depending on what happens with these these negotiations. The annexation would take a legislative change in the current RCWs, but I think
we could do that.
I think we could do it.
Yeah.
I really do, and I think we ought to pursue that, regardless of what happens here. Because I think that's another option on the table.
Okay. Joe?
I just want to clarify on the annexation to a district. I know that there was a lot of confusion over this. It started with the consultant basically providing a legal opinion. I was not allowed to review, or did not get asked to review that ahead of time. Since then, I've had a chance to look at it, and it's my opinion that if we were really interested in annexing to a district, that is a possibility under the current RCWs. So, of course, we'd look at it a lot closer if we were really interested in going down that road. But it seems fairly apparent to me that it was just a mistaken interpretation by the consultant. So. And I'm sorry to jump in like that. I just wanted to correct this and be on the record once and for all, because it keeps coming up over and over in kind of a confused state. So
We're always happy if you interrupt us and share that type of information. Yes.
Legal advice is helpful.
Yeah.
Did you want to answer that question, or are those other two options, do you consider them more attractive now, or are they still second or whatever, second fiddle to the RFA?
I think the RFA is, as Director Shackman stated a few weeks ago, that in the long run the RFA is probably the cheapest expense for the citizens in regards to getting the fire service. I think ILAs, it's been my impression through this process that North Shore would love interlocal agreements with us so they could run the whole thing. And that's just my impression. But, I think we need to look at all options. When we went and had ESCI come up and make their recommendations were first the RFA. And then if that falls through, go look elsewhere. But their recommendation was first the RFA. And we paid good money for that. I agreed with them.
Complete? Good?
Can I cast out?
Yeah, the same question?
Yeah.
All right. I think our first step's the RFA. I think it is the model that best suits for the long-term health of public, the fire EMS side of public safety in the city of Bothell. Contracts and our local agreements, those are, every so often so many years you're renegotiating a contract, and I think it just becomes a little bit of a stumbling block, not as efficient. As far as going to a fire district, really no different than an RFA.
Their taxation, right?
It's the taxation is exactly the same.
Oh, they do the benefit? Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. Okay.
From how it gets funded, it's exactly the same as a fire district. The difference is when we go through the RFA process, we create the governance model. So the city will, in one way or another, will always have a representative at the table. How that representative comes about is the committee will determine. Is it an elected official? Is it somebody elected from the city? But the city's represented. When you go to a fire district, you're no longer represented as a city. It's just at-large elections, and you could have commissioners where none of them are from the city. So at least with an RFA, more than likely we'll have a governance model that will include at least somebody from the city that sits on that in that governance. In the financial side of it, on the taxation, it's no different than a district. So.
Great, thank you.
Just one last thing, sorry. I'm taking a lot of time.
Yep. So Councilmember Sandberg doesn't get to speak anymore.
That way,
Please.
I'd be interested in negotiating that the RFA is called the Bothell Fire Department instead of North Lake Fire Department or North Lake RFA. I'd like it to be the Bothell RFA.
Wow. I'm not sure that Woodinville's going to jump on that. That's a great parting comment. Councilmember Sandberg, the floor is yours after that.
So the original motion when the North Shore Fire District was in the mix was to come to the table with $1.5 million per year for 5 years as a capital buy-in.
That wasn't the motion.
Not-
Made the motion. It wasn't our motion.
A half ago.
When we were talking about moving forward with RFA with the North Shore Fire District, when they were when they were still in the mix of the negotiations, we had talked about providing as our capital buy-in up to $1.5 million per 5 years for a total of $7.5 million. So do you feel that amount is still appropriate?
Well, the 1.5 was based on the request from the committee, so that's the upper end. If you're asking, do I think it can be lowered, then that's what the purpose of the negotiations will be for.
And so when you say the 1.5, we really mean total 7.5.
That's correct.
Okay. Because now we're talking about a smaller service area, so I would expect that there would be some impact on a capital buy-in that would arrive at equity.
None of the numbers have been recalculated in terms of expenses or revenues associated with a 3-agency RFA versus a 4-agency RFA. So that may be something we'll have to explore as to how a 3-agency RFA is affecting not only the capital reserve balance or the reserve balance of the RFA, but just the overall taxation of all the RFA agencies will be paying.
And then the ESCI study, as I remember it, and I haven't looked at it in the last couple of months, indicated that there were maybe some service needs in the east portion of Woodinville. I think that their service times were longer, and so they had greater service needs in Woodinville, and so I guess I would like that to be discussed. And if we wrap in with Woodinville, are we then acquiring some of their deficiencies or needs that we wouldn't otherwise be in as a member of the fire of our own fire department? And then how much money is the city going to be allocating towards an RFA implementation study, or is there an additional study cost?
I don't know yet what the consultant would charge if we needed to update the study to reflect a 3-agency RFA.
And is that something that would come back to council for approval?
It would need to if we were to execute any amendment. Okay. Or we'd bring it back to you. And again, I don't know the cost, what that would be at this point.
And then I appreciate our 3 council members who served on the planning committee. I mean, it provided a streamline to the planning process. But I noticed in the agenda bill it says that that it's the attorney's recommendation that we not conduct these negotiations in executive session because they don't apply. And for me, one purpose of not holding an executive session or holding these meetings in public is to conduct the public's business in public for them to understand what the process is. And I feel like if we just appoint one member of council to this committee, I to move forward with negotiations. I feel that we're the rest of the council and the public continues to be less informed than the core group that's doing the negotiating. So how do you envision addressing that? Because if we're going to move to the implementation phase, there's a lot more information and education that has to go on with the public about what we're proposing for this RFA.
Well, whether or not a council member observes the negotiations or not from Bothell, once those negotiations complete, I would report the findings and as well as my recommendation back to council in an open public meeting, and then you could continue then with whatever public outreach you deemed appropriate at that time.
Can I interject? I actually share Councilmember Sandberg's concern. I don't know that it is appropriate to have a single member of council participate in those negotiations. I think if we're having negotiations, it makes sense to have the city manager conduct the negotiations and report back to the full council in an open public session about what the result of those negotiations are and what he wants to recommend to the council, and then we can collaboratively at the table make that decision together. But I think the idea of I think it made sense when we were doing a study to say there's an enormous amount of meetings, there's a lot of information that's going to be digested, we'll have 3 people who really dig down deep in that. And I think that worked well for the study process. That wasn't a negotiation. I think at this point it's appropriate to have the city manager negotiate it and bring it back in a public session to the council as a whole to discuss that. But I would share her concern, and I don't support appointing a single member of council to those negotiations.
Councilmember Sandberg.
Well, and if we're moving forward into this implementation phase, I think it just becomes all the more important that we understand and educate the public what this will mean to the taxpaying public, and this is exactly what Deputy Mayor Spivey had spoke to. Because we've had some conversation that, and it's been in the paper, that this would, in the original model, this would just be a 4 cent per thousand increase. And so on a $400,000 home, the implication is that if we went to an RFA model, it would only cost the average taxpayer of a $400,000 home $16 more per year. And I just don't think that's realistic. I don't think that's realistic to move forward with that. And we need to be really clear about what are the financial impacts to our tax-paying citizens, because I think it will be more expensive, but I think it also will be more expensive if we operate as a fire department. But as long as we are transparent and dedicated to educating the public about the choices before them, I think that we are more likely to see support, have thoughtful dialogue, and if they have to play catch-up trying to figure out what's going on, we're not going to achieve those things.
Great. Thank you.
Councilmember Sandberg, I'd just like to make sure that we're on the same page and speaking the same language. There is no implementation phase coming up at all. The implementation phase would be there's been a vote of the people, they said yes, and now we're transitioning from Bothell Fire and EMS to a RFA to be named later. That would be the implementation phase. Right now, we're still in the planning committee phase, and then the next step from here would be to actually, although it may not change much, but to actually lay out what the department would look like as far as the structure and the staffing, and then you start getting into a bit of a hypothetical contract model with the employee groups. So implementation doesn't occur until after a vote. I just want to make sure that we're speaking the same language here.
Okay, I was just using I think that was the terminology that was in the last motion that we made. There's the planning phase, and then there's, okay, I will look it up. But yes, there is still a vote yet to come.
Well, there's a lot of work yet to come. We don't even know.
More importantly, there's still an agreement I mean, like, this is not the implementation for what we're saying. What the purpose of the direction tonight is saying the city manager should go and negotiate the best deal he can with our good friends in the Woodinville Fire District. At that point, he would then bring it back to us, at which point we would say, good deal, not a good deal. At that point, it would then, if Woodinville would agree, it would then go to a vote of the people, and only then, if the people said yes, would it be in the implementation phase. I think all along, people who have opposed the concept of an RFA have tried to say, well, it's a greased rail, it's a train, it's going along. I think the folks in North Shore would disagree with that.
I just wanted to, this is what the motion said. So it's developing an implementation plan for voter consideration. So not implementation phase, but proceed with negotiating and ultimately developing an implementation plan for voter consideration. We're developing a plan. We're moving forward with the idea of negotiating with these agencies with the ultimate result of providing an implementation plan for voter consideration.
Whoever scheduled 20 minutes for this item and we're at 40?
But the
RFA, seriously? So
that
Councilmember
plan-
Evans, and we need to finish in 10 minutes.
That plan won't start until we're in agreement on the financials, as far as the equity.
I'm just trying to reiterate this is exactly what's in our agenda bill.
Yeah, Councilmember Evans.
Well, maybe that was the wrong word, but there was a phase one that we've essentially completed with the study with ESI. And if you look in that, it says then the next phase will be to sit down and work through a myriad of details before we even get to a plan that can be proposed or implemented. So if this moves, where we're at is this negotiation stage right now, and if we come to an agreement with Woodinville, then the next phase will be another year at least of study of what this thing would look like. And at that point, then the council would say, we don't like the way it looks, we don't want it to go any further from our standpoint. Or we would say, okay, it looks like a good plan, let's present it to the voters in a vote and let them vote on it. So it's really phase two of the process, and then phase three would be, it's been approved on the ballot, and now you implement the thing. So, I don't know if that helps, but it says that in the study.
So, City Manager, do you feel that you have clear direction to move forward?
Yeah, you've repeated what the May 19th motion has been, so I have direction.
That is my understanding. To move forward from here would be going with the May 19 motion. If anybody disagrees, by all means say yes.
Well, I think there's two additions to that. I think one is that North Shore is not included in that, and I think the other is that it's implicit that he's able to discuss what Bothell would get in return for being part of that, because according to the study, the facilities in the city of Bothell are the worst of all three jurisdictions. The North Shore is irrelevant at this point. But what we would get back in capital contributions as part of joining the RFA, I think is part of that. I think that's part. I mean, does anybody disagree that that would be part of the conversation?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Councilmember Ram.
Well, I think capital can't be funded. They have to go out, like an RFA has to be created, and then they have to go out for a levy for capital. Isn't that right? They can't use the RFA taxing authority for capital.
That's not true.
That's not true?
How would you? That's not true. I mean, that's not my. I would defer to our city attorney. I'm not an RFA attorney, but that's
how
not
they
true.
use their money that they collect, whether they use it for operating expenses or for capital expenses, is their policy decision.
Oh, okay. I thought that they could not use. Okay, my bad.
Councilmember Agnew, then Deputy Mayor Spivey.
I think talking about capital is kind of irrelevant since we're looking at financial equality. And if we don't have financial equality, there's not going to be any capital improvement anywhere because they're not going to have any funding.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I think this isn't a capital discussion. This is all about the financial equality, what the money coming to the table. The capital is kind of a separate issue, and that's the way all the other partners in this process have viewed it, is of being fiscally equitable in this, as far as it boiled down to reserves. The other agencies had cash reserves that they were bringing to the table, and we didn't. And this is what they were looking for, was essentially cash reserves from Bothell.
Yeah. Well, okay. So let me have the last word on this. For me, it's level of service. That's absolutely critical to me. Obviously, the financial portion of it, we need to represent the citizens of Bothell. I would love to go with Andy and have it named all Bothell RFA, because that's one of the saddest part of it for me is I like having a Bothell Fire Department. So I don't know that we'd be successful on that. But ultimately, we need to make sure that level of service around the city is well covered. I've always heard about the South Station for 11 years of my life until 2 weeks ago. Heard that it's not needed anymore, which was a change of position from 11 years sitting on this council. So please keep that in mind, and I think you have clear direction, and we need to end this conversation and move on with many other items we have, unless you have further.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say we had clear direction. I think you have two council members of the opinion that capital should enter into the equation of whether or not we pay $750 or $1.5. Two council members who believing that we shouldn't have capital enter the equation. So there's still not necessarily clear from
And
three
we
other council
should.
members.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I guess I just want to be clear, because I actually think that we did have clear. I haven't heard. I've heard two council members say that there's not, that they don't want to have that in the conversation.
Right. Then I've heard two that said they did. I haven't heard from the three others.
Okay. So who would you like to see that?
Okay.
Trace, and then Andy.
Well, I can confirm what Deputy Mayor Spivey said. The first thing they're interested in is the equity level. Now, in order to get there, there's this issue of capital improvements too, and how that plays into the equity issue
is the negotiation.
Is yet to be determined. But the first thing that was talked about was the equity level, and that wasn't necessarily defined as to whether that was cash or was defined as being cash, but is there another way to do that? And so,
but I mean, the issue is, do you take capital completely off the table? And I don't think anybody is. I don't even think Councilmember Spivey and Agnew are saying that. I mean, that's what you're asking for, is can I negotiate on the capital front when I go to this meeting? And I don't think anyone is saying that the citizens of Bothell can't, that you can't include a capital conversation in that.
Yeah, we need to hear from two other council members who waved their hands, and we really need to move on.
So I don't know when you would have the capital conversation if you wouldn't have it now. So I agree that we should have capital part of the conversation.
So, do you agree, Chris? Or yeah, okay, good. Thank you very much for a rousing discussion. Council's going to go into break until 7:04. Yeah, I want to get 8:04. 8:04. Thank you. We're adjourned. Great. Welcome back, everybody. We'll start up again. We're going to jump into AB 15077, which is our continued public hearing, which is open. We have our discussion. Oops. Sorry. I think I said the wrong. 15078, our continued public hearing to consider Planning Commission recommendation on 2015 periodic plan and code update. We have Gary Hassler with us this evening and an updated matrix to follow, which we're going to spend a lot of time looking at and reviewing. So, hi.
I'm actually.
You're not Gary. You're Dave Boyd.
I'm sitting in for Gary. Gary.
Okay.
We didn't originally have this this night scheduled for this topic, and Gary had had a conflict. So I'm going to take the lead here. Bruce Blackburn is here to answer questions on the elements and subareas and issues that he's worked on. But we did want to dive right in. I don't really have a presentation and PowerPoint for you, but I just wanted to hit on a few things. I've already circulated two new exhibits. Exhibit HHS-E2, a letter from Marcia Stedman, and Exhibit CF-E1, an email from Anthony Boscolo of the Commerce Department. The latter exhibit includes one issue that isn't included on the matrix, that was the one issue in their review of the Planning Commission recommendation that they wanted to change, to add some qualifying language to one of the policies in the capital facilities element. But in general, he was quite complimentary of the work and the recommendation made by the Planning Commission. So that was good to get. I've also circulated a slightly revised version of the matrix. Councilmember Sandberg met with staff this morning and indicated that she would like to withdraw some of the issues that she had raised that were included in the matrix and focus on the issues that she thought were most important. So those are shown, they're grayed out in the new matrix. There's one other slight modification. We've added she also brought up one additional issue that we've added to the natural environment element.
I'm sorry, Dave, for clarity, the issues that she's dropping are in gray?
Are in gray, yes.
Okay, all right.
And that new natural environment issue is in blue text. The red text is showing the language added since the last meeting that was in your packet. The blue text was not in your packet. And then the matrix also, in the red text, has a fairly lengthy discussion of the SEPA issues that were brought up last time. We suggest that a good way to proceed would be to take up the issues one by one and giving direction on each issue by the entire council by consensus or vote. And we would like to suggest that we prioritize the housing issues because Arthur Sullivan is with us here tonight. He's not available to join us next week. So that would be our suggestion for a first priority. And then possible second priority would be the property owner initiated requests that are highlighted in yellow in the left column.
Good. Yeah, my plan is to lead everybody through this. We're not just so we can take these off the table or put them on the table and just continue to move forward. And tonight we have an hour scheduled. We start at 8:04, so we will wrap up at 9:04. We do have an executive session for council to be aware of regarding personnel matters, so we will be meeting right when we finished, probably till around 10 o'clock tonight on that. So we do have a sign-up sheet for the public, and the first on the sign-up sheet is Steve Nielsen.
Thank you very much. I had a chance to speak to you all last week, and I wanted to be sure that the written text was in your packets. For those of you who were not here, there were comments that I'd given a set to the clerk. I wanted to make sure that you all had that. This is regarding property at the intersection of Northeast 160th Street and 124th Avenue Northeast, your very southeast gateway to the city of Bothell, recently annexed. Has to do with the zoning classification that was assigned to the property in your annexation process. The council's policy is the city's approach to land use planning and zoning for the area when there are annexations is to apply the Bothell Comprehensive Plan designations and zoning classifications which most closely match the existing King County zones. My point that I was making last week is that your Planning Commission has sent to you a recommendation that is completely inconsistent with that stated policy. And I made the argument in my presentation last week. The King County zoning is R8, which means 8 dwelling units per acre, and the Planning Commission recommended R5400A, which is about 6 dwelling units per acre. Bothell's R4000 zone is 8.17 dwelling units per acre. That's very close, not slightly close, it's close, and it matches what the King County zoning was on the property. We believe that. We believe that the policy that was stated is what would be applied in the post-annexation zoning of our property. And it wasn't, and I'm here to ask you to consider the implementation of your policy by applying the R4000 zone to these properties. There are 4 properties at the intersection. The southerly one is a rental property. The next one to the north is a rental property. Then there's a vacant lot, and then there is the Nielsen property, our property, where we've lived for 38 years under King County ordinances. Raised our family there. My daughter and husband teach in the North Shore schools. My son coaches and plays and sports in the area. We've been active in the community, and now it's time for us to feel some mitigation, experience some mitigation from the impacts of King County, City of Kirkland, City of Woodinville, which has approved 150 building lots under construction just down the street from us.
Great. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate you coming forward this evening.
Did you all get my packet? I've got some more copies if you didn't.
Can you give me one tonight? That would be very helpful. Thank you, sir. Next I have on the sign-up sheet is Ms. Leanne Tesori.
Good evening. I am the manager and one of the owners of Country Village, and I would like to speak in regards to the proposed zoning change for the Country Village sub-area. I was out of town during the last City Council meeting, but have read the new proposed affordable housing requirement for the sub-area. After countless hours of Planning Commission meetings, gathering public input, and getting staff's recommendation, a consensus was reached proposing an RAC designation for the Country Village sub-area to be presented to City Council. Never once did anyone mention affordable housing. No representative from ARCH or any other group attended the meetings. This is a complex issue. Now you are considering imposing this requirement in the space of 2 weeks without properly researching the impact on residents and property owners. We do not support this proposal. We understand the good intentions, but planning for affordable housing needs to be looked at throughout all of Bothell and designated in the most appropriate areas, not imposed randomly on 2 comp plan amendments. We've met with city staff and local planners, all who agreed that townhouses priced at a reasonable rate to meet the needs of the middle class are a perfect transition from Country Village to the neighboring single-family homes. This would give our middle-class residents, who make up 80% of our population, an affordable option for new housing, which doesn't currently exist in Bothell. Townhouses would comply with the 35-foot height limit, but if you impose an affordable housing requirement on the property, you run the risk of just not getting the property developed at all because it isn't economically feasible. Affordable housing projects are typically more feasible in higher density areas, with building heights that allow the density to be 4 or even 5 times as high as townhouses. We continue to support the original proposal and feel the last-minute affordable housing requirement needs to be given more thought as an overall plan for Bothell and designated after due deliberation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Leanne. Next on the sign-up sheet is Mr. Mike Challenger.
Good evening, Mayor Freed, members of council. Mike Challenger, 21015 9th Avenue Southeast in Bothell. I wanted to add a few remarks to the Wayne Golf Course issue, if I may, since it was brought up as part of a sub-area discussion at the Planning Commission. It's currently in private hands right now. I see no compelling reason that it should not continue to be in private hands, and I don't think the city ought to be involved in taking over the land or acquiring the land, particularly since previously the council of the city had no interest in acquiring the land earlier. And as far as I know, King County has sufficient green and open space. There's no reason why a continued private ownership should not maintain what it is now. And I can see no compelling reason for the city to step in and acquire the property without even the public knowing what the immediate cost of doing so would be, and more importantly, what the future cost of this acquisition would be, because I think you may be bulldozed by the environmentalists who want, I'm sure, to turn it into some sort of wildlife refuge at who knows what cost. Not that I'm against those, but I don't think that's appropriate in this case. In any case, we have enough enough building regulations and codes that would restrict any development that would degrade the existing environment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Challenger. Bob Hurst.
Hi, I'm Bob Hurst, 8516 Northeast Bothell Way. I've run the chainsaw shop in Bothell Way. I've been a resident for 40-some years, and really glad he just made his comments. First, I want to comment about a piece of property I'm developing up on 189th. It asks for a change in the zoning from R8400 down to R7200. The Planning Commission unanimously approved it or recommended it. I'd like you to consider their recommendation. And what this gentleman just said about Wayne Golf Course, I've driven past that every day for 35 years now. That corridor is the last really beautiful place in southern Bothell, and we really do need to do whatever it takes to preserve it. Once houses are built on it, they can't be dug back up. If we make a mistake now buying it, setting it aside, that can be redone. But if we allow building on it, allow it to be covered up, that can't be undone. So err on the side of caution and pick it up at whatever it takes to get it, and just put it away for the future. I wouldn't want to be a council member that let that slip by. Thank you.
Thanks. I've seen your store, been to your store many times.
Thank you for your patience.
Any specials on chainsaws this summer?
Well, we'll talk about that.
All right, all right. Any other folks wish to address council this evening? Yeah, ma'am, come forward. State your name for the record.
Good evening. Claudia Elsmore, 17320 East Riverside Place. I'm up here again in regards to the rezone request for the South Riverside project. This area along the north side of the Norway Hill is unstable and lies in a critical area ordinance, as you all know. Throughout the 2004 and 2015 comprehensive plan, it states to protect these areas, maintaining setback buffers along the wetlands, the streams, and the slopes. That is my goal, to be sure that the council is aware and preserve this valuable resource. The property has the following restrictions. They have slopes greater than the 15% grade, critical area ordinance zone, soil erosion zone, 2 year-round creeks that feed our Sammamish River, and they both lie within the Feather Edge area. There is a reason that the area along the Norway Hill is protected against higher densities or up zones. And they've got documented landslides where development was permitted, hillsides acting as natural filtration for the Sammamish River, the water pollutants from the creeks that fill our Sammamish River bordering the homes today with the pesticides and auto pollutants, and our own Imagine Bothell statement to protect Bothell's feathered edge of trees for wildlife and air quality as in Land Use Goals 8. And I stated this all before, and it's Land Use Goals 7, 8, and 9. So, Deputy Mayor Spivey, I'm hoping I'm saying that right. Is it Spivey? Okay. You recommended to include the South Riverside Zone under the Specialized Senior Housing Overlay Area. Okay, that's your recommendation as of June 2nd.
I was working with the people that have something with the Planning Commission, and that was something they had asked for, and I have moved it forward so far.
Okay, so I've been to many of the Bothell Planning Commission's meeting, and as you all stated, and that there was numerous meetings, like more than any meetings I've ever been to, in regards to the 2015 Bothell Comprehensive Plan recommendations. So that I know the Furman brothers, Well, they were here. Were at most of those meetings speaking. A lot of citizens were here speaking, and never was the specialized SSHO topic ever brought up. I thought that when the Bothell Planning Commission closed any of the new requests for the recommendation of the Bothell Planning comprehensive recommendation to the City Council. I've also got a call into SEPA in regards to the guidelines and of how this is all working after the fact. So maybe that will be shared. I'm sorry you ran out of the packet, so I wasn't able to get that. My other question is this overlay for the Furman property only? Is that where you're asking for the SSHO on the Furman property only on
You
that
can
area?
answer if you want, otherwise. We do have a question for you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, just for that piece of property?
Great.
Okay.
Councilmember Lamb?
So I had a question. You talked a lot about the steep slopes and hydrological functions and two creeks. I wasn't clear from your testimony how a change in zoning from 9,600 to 7,200 would, how would, if it's developed as 9,600 square foot lots as opposed to 7,200 square foot lots, how does that impact the issues that you just talked about?
Well, from what I understand is we're putting one house for every 7,200 square feet versus one house for every 9,600 square feet. So now you've taken the land that's apparently going to be about 40.
Furman Brothers would be very happy if that were true, but it's not even close to true that they would get one house for every 7,200 square feet on their lots.
Isn't that with an R72?
It means that the lots that they're permitted to have, which would take out like their storm detention, their streets, all of the critical area buffers that you alluded to are all taken out of that. So none of those are buildable.
Right.
And then what's left, the lots have to be, those are the dimensions of the lots that they would be left.
It's about 40% is what they have for buildable space. That's what they, after all the setbacks.
Right. And I guess my question to you was, what is the impact to, if the critical areas are set aside anyways, what does it matter to all of those functions you've talked about if the 40% that's built upon is 7,200 square foot lots or 9,600 square foot lots if the same building area is covered?
More impervious surface. You're going to have more.
I don't believe that. I mean, I
All right.
would respectfully disagree. I don't believe that's the case.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you. I
for coming out this
appreciate it.
evening. Are there others who wish to address council this evening on the comp plan? Yes, ma'am. If you came forward and state your name. Yeah, if you could just state your name for the record, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you. It's Janet, and the last name's DeGrave. So this evening, I brought 3 things with me. So the first thing I brought was a map that shows the area that I drive in the city. And that's this map right here, and the lines are in yellow. Then the second thing that I brought this evening was a map that shows the green spaces that I visit probably on a couple times a week. So I think there's 3 push pins. So one place I go is Centennial Park. Another place I go is the ball fields over by the YMCA. There's a trail there that I walk on 3 times a week. And then there's a little tiny trail on 228th and Fitzgerald. There's lots of pretty ducks to visit and take pictures of. And then the last thing that I brought with me was the handout that I turned in to the city clerk that mentions the changes that I want in my sub-area plan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You put a lot of thought into this. I appreciate it. It's helpful to have your comments in writing, too. Thanks. Anyone else wish to address council? All right, I see no other hands. So, council, we are going to jump into this matrix that we have in front of us, and based upon staff's recommendation, we'll first be jumping into the housing element, which is on page, here we go, page 15. So I guess how I'd like to do it is, in the matter of time, we have about a half hour left on this subject, would be to all just list it. If we'll go around to each person and say whether you're in favor of the change or state you'd like to stay with the Planning Commission's recommendation. So, Councilmember Lamb.
Are we going through just one?
I just want to start with number one.
Yeah.
With
So number one, the affordable housing within the Canyon Park Business Center and Country Village subareas. I think that Bothell, I looked at staff's comments, and actually we have a lot of affordable housing in Bothell. We have two very large mobile home parks in the Snohomish County portion of Bothell. We received communication from the owner, one of the owners of the Canyon Park Business Park, that the Owners Association would oppose any change to residential if this component is included. And because they have effectively a homeowners or business owners association, if they do that, that's going to block any residential development in this area. So I will not be supporting. I support the Planning Commission's recommendation, which is what was, as the speaker pointed out, was fully considered, which the public had an opportunity to comment on, was in front of it. So I support the Planning Commission's recommendation.
Councilmember Evans, do you support Planning Commission, or would you like a change?
No, I do support the Planning Commission recommendation, and I understand the need for affordable housing. The problem is this hasn't been considered and just has kind of come up here at the end. I understand there's a need, and I think that's important to provide that. I'm not sure the timing's right, and it is possible that as this item comes back, the plan update for the Canyon Park Business Center, that it could be added at that time.
Yep.
Is my understanding.
Okay, so stay with Planning Commission?
Yes.
I hate to be rude, but we're going to try to get through all these quickly. Councilmember Agnew, in support of Planning Commission or a change?
I'd be supportive of the change to option C.
Okay.
For the affordable housing.
Great. Councilmember Sandberg?
I am in support of any of the options that have been presented to us. Any option that other council members can find palatable. When we say that the statement has been we don't want to burden Snohomish County with affordable housing. We don't want to burden them with that. Arch and staff has made a pretty compelling analysis that we're not burdening Snohomish County with affordable housing because the majority of the affordable housing is in King County. So this isn't actually adding a burden. It's establishing equity throughout the city. I don't feel that we have enough affordable housing, and this is our opportunity to provide more. Last week, and
I hate to be rude, but we do need to get through this, and there's actually 4 council members that are for Planning Commission, so at this point we can move on. I'm not trying to be rude, I'm given the responsibility to get through these items.
3. So this is what we've heard from, and I just want to I want to point out that the Seattle Times published and has published a series all week. This came out last Thursday. Affordable housing vanishing on the east side. We have the opportunity, and I believe the moral obligation to take this opportunity where there is no residential component, so 0 units per acre, and upzoning it to a residential activity center, which could be potentially 100 units per acre. We are upzoning and creating this intensity where there doesn't exist already. And many East King County cities, I believe, Arch has said that there are 8 East King County cities that have already implemented approaches to allow for affordable housing. And so we have some very flexible options in front of us. And so this now is the time to do it, because if we wait until some later planning phase, there's not the basis to add in the affordable housing later.
Yep. Thank you so much. I am for the Planning Commission recommendation. Councilmember or Deputy Mayor Spivey whispered to me he's for the Planning Commission recommendation. Do you wish to comment, knowing there's a majority to stay with moving forward?
I would just say I would have opted for one of the options instead of the Planning Commission recommendation.
Okay, thank you so much. Moving on to the next item on here, and really, you've given me the opportunity to run the meeting, so I'm not trying to be rude, but we do need to continue to move through these. HHS 2, anybody wish to make council, do you want to start at your side, Councilmember Rayam? You are the one who came up with this idea, the ADU, I believe, setback?
Can you give me a quick second to refresh my memory here? If somebody else wants to go, they can.
Anybody wish to speak on this matter?
Well, I think the staff clarified that this does not apply to attached dwelling units, the rear yard setback, that those will be considered as is. That's my understanding.
Setbacks for ADU. So are you saying stay with Planning Commission recommendation, Councilmember Evans? Yes. Okay. Councilmember Sandberg?
There was significant language. This is in our implementing regulations packet. In fact, this is the only place where the ADU language really appears. Significant weakening of the language. So, for example, it used to read that the primary dwelling unit had to be occupied by the owner of the property. Now it's the owner or an immediate family member. There's reduction. There's allowances for increasing the building footprint of the accessory buildings, and so I would like us to consider removing some of this permissive language.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lamb.
I support the Planning Commission's recommendation. I think accessory dwelling units are important for people who have disabled children, for people who have older parents. If somebody is the owner of a home and their parent comes to live with them, or they have a disabled child who has to stay with them through adults, that person is not the owner of the lot. Adding language to specifically exclude people like that, I think, is poor policy and poor morality.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Agnew?
I agree with the Planning Commission.
Okay, I agree with the Planning Commission as well. Deputy Mayor?
I agree with Planning Commission recommendation.
Okay. Councilmember Rayam, you have...
I just real quick for clarifying, so the primary structure has a setback, and that setback will be applied to the accessory dwelling unit as well?
Yes, that's correct.
And what is that? Is it just 10?
In most single-family zones, it's 20 feet in the front, a minimum of 5 on the side, about a minimum combined side setback of 15, and 15 in the rear.
Okay.
Accessory buildings are allowed in the rear yard up to 5 feet, but that would not apply to. We'll make the change so that won't apply to ADUs.
Okay, so ADUs would have the same setbacks as, okay, and that's with the Planning Commission recommendation, that was the case, or do we need to ask?
Planning Commission did not, the code language didn't include that, but we will include that with council's, based on council's direction here.
Yeah, I support that.
Yeah.
So the PC, okay. So there is 6-1 on that. HSH3 was actually removed by Councilmember Sandberg. Is anybody wanting to insist to keep it in? Same with 4. 5, 6 is the planning, keep HOG1. Does anybody want to state whether in favor of leading the Planning Commission recommendation or otherwise? Let me quickly look at my notes. I would like to keep the Planning Commission recommendation. Anyone else?
I concur with that.
It's 6.
Oh, what happened to 3?
3, 4, and 5 were removed by Councilmember Sandberg
sorry.
today.
Okay.
I agree with the Planning Commission.
Okay.
I'll keep with the Planning Commission.
Okay, so that's 4, Planning Commission. Planning Commission. Councilmember Sandberg or Rayam.
I support keeping the original language, goal number 1 of the housing element, because this is the key goal that promotes quality of life.
Okay, thank you. Rayam, do you wish to comment?
I support
Okay.
As per Sandberg's request to keep it.
5-2, HS7. I'm just going to go forward and just say 7. I'm in favor of staying with the Planning Commission recommendation. Others?
I am as well.
Lamb,
PC.
Evans, PC. Agnew, PC. PC. Sandberg, Rayum.
This was another opportunity to address affordability issues. And you can talk about having market incentives, but they don't work after the fact, and we've seen that in the downtown area.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rayum.
I'm fine with the PC recommendation.
Okay, so that's 6-1. 8 and 9 have been removed, and 10 have been removed. Anybody wish to put those back in? No? So 11 is, can we monitor the affordability of housing produced? Strike HSP4. I was in favor of leaving that in. I'm missing my next page.
So really what I intended to do in leaving that in was to ask if we can monitor affordability of the housing being produced. And you can forget the
No,
other part.
I would like that. I'm supportive of your recommended change. So that would be for this, I guess, Sandberg change or Sandberg change. So that's 2. Anyone else?
So this is under A, like
11.
adding some of the language. Yeah, I'm in favor of that.
So what exactly are you in favor of monitoring the affordability of the housing produced?
Yes.
Okay.
So I hear 4. Any other comments?
I support it.
Support.
The Sandberg change.
And just so we're clear, this is to say regularly monitor housing-related data, including and then adding the price and affordability of housing.
Yes.
Okay.
I support it.
Yes, and the location and rate of development, specialized senior housing and nursing homes. Good. All right, so that was the housing.
Can I just clarify, there was one other potential edit to the policy at the bottom there in italics.
Consider using a variety of infrastructure funding methods such as existing revenue sources, impact fees, local improvement districts, and general obligations. Absolutely. For me. Everybody else? Any disagreement?
Is that consistent with the letter that we got from Commerce?
Arthur? Yeah.
Yeah, I would support that change as well.
Perfect. Good changes. I think the next recommendation to go to, David, was to the sub-area conversations. So we will start.
Yeah, specifically the property owner requests.
Okay.
That are highlighted in yellow.
So all sub-areas except downtown and the 4 entirely in unincorporated Snohomish County. Oh, that's a sub-area. So the ones highlighted in yellow would be the Brickyard, Queensgate sub-area.
Yeah, starting with the Spadacia Nielsen O'Day request.
Okay.
I'll turn this over to Bruce.
Let me quickly get to my... You threw me a curveball tonight with the notes I took and then getting a new one, so let me quickly get to it.
Try to keep the pagination the same, so just...
So are we skipping, so we started at the property-specific requests, and then there's, it starts with, there's all sub-areas except downtown, and then there's the Shelton View area.
I think we're going to jump right back up to that after we make sure that we get property owners that are actually here in with us, with a member in the public. We're starting with Shelton View. Oh, it wasn't a property owner initiated change. That's the issue. So
yes, both.
Brickyard Road first, and then we'll jump back up to the top. Okay. I'm in favor of the BQ1 PC recommended change.
I'd support that as well.
Okay, Councilmember Sandberg.
This is the Spadacia Nielsen O'Day request?
That's correct.
BQ1.
So this property-specific request stands out from all the other ones because when you look at the Planning Commission and the staff analysis, the entire area under consideration is completely surrounded by R7200. And it's R7200, completely developed, single family. And so to put attached housing designation in the center of what is all detached housing is inconsistent. It violates our housing, I think it's Housing Policy 6 or Land Use Policy 6 to maintain the character of single-family neighborhoods. And so in their analysis, in the staff's response, I just want to note that it's not the city's responsibility to ensure that a property owner gets their highest and best use out of their property. And staff says predictions regarding how many units can be attained under one code or another are speculative. They had the opportunity to apply for development under the King County regulations like other nearby properties did, and they didn't. And so I'm not going to be supporting the change to 5400A. I think it should be 5400D. The density is not changed. There's no impact on the population capacity. And detached housing is consistent with all of the surrounding existing zoning.
Great, thank you. Others wish to comment? Before we do, Bruce, we have BQ2. Should these be discussed collaboratively? There's BQ1 and BQ2.
Yeah, unfortunately, BQ2 was the result of the comments that you got at the last hearing.
Okay.
So it covers the same.
So if we just say that we're going to stick with the Planning Commission recommendation, or we want to go with the new requested 4,000 square foot, is that what you want?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. The Planning Commission recommendation are 5400A. The request from the applicants is R4000.
Yeah, okay. Great. So who's next? Okay, thank you. Yes, Councilmember Evans.
And I appreciate the public request here to make this R4000. I understand that that was our guiding principle going into these things, to try to match that. The Planning Commission has looked at that in detail, and the R5400A seems to fit better there from their standpoint. And my position on the R5400A, that it could provide an overall better project than the R7200 on that corner, based on how the units, but until you actually do a layout and go through the process, you don't know. But at this point, I would support the R5400A Planning Commission recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Spivey or Ram?
I support the PC recommendation.
Okay, Mr. Ram?
So I was on the Planning Commission when we zoned this, and I do remember that property specifically. So our 5400D was what I would recommend keeping.
Okay, thank you. So B, R5400A was the recommended change by us. Moving on to the next would be Waynita Simons Norway Hill sub-area. So the traffic and landside issue related to the South Riverside. This is Furman. So this is the Furman property. Planning recommendation, I think, was 7,200. Why I'm not seeing this on my little sheet, though. Recommends reflecting.
Yeah. So the issue was wasn't raised about the R7200, but the
change.
Okay.
adding the SSHO.
Okay.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor, do you wish to speak to this item?
Well, right now, the things that we've gone through currently, where are we with this, with SEPA? Are we going to have to delay it, or?
Well, yeah. The discussion there is at the very front of the matrix where we talked about SEPA and where.
Right. Of the things that we've essentially agreed on here, where are we in that?
We haven't done anything that increases the intensity or density of the Planning Commission recommendation, which was analyzed under SEPA, so we're good.
All right. I'm trying to get a feel for where we're going to be on. I guess we're essentially down at the last issues here, aren't we?
We have to go back. Delay for a second and do Shelton View, and go back down to Country Village, Country Park sub-area, and then we'll be done with this.
Yeah, I'd like to get a lay of the land on how other sub-areas are coming out.
So Shelton View Meridian, 3rd Avenue, southeast sub-area. This is a deferral request to study potential rezones of Nike Hill and WAC requirement that all related proposals be considered together. I'm saying to stay with Planning Commission recommendation, no change.
I would concur.
Okay. Councilmember Sandberg?
I would like us to remove this so-called placeholder language for future comprehensive change and rezone requests that the Planning Commission has put before us. So one of these, for example, is the Nike Hill rezone. Another one was the Wayne Golf Course rezone. Things like issues like transfer of development rights. I would like all of those issues pulled from the comprehensive plan for a couple of reasons. One, these issues never went through the formal docketing process. So in January of this year, we had a docketing process, and then prior, in last year, we docketed a major plan update, and all of these proposals have not been considered cumulatively in front of council. And so much like we require of other applicants, like we did at the UW Bothell, to go through the docketing process where they submit an application and they submit a fee to be considered, I think we should do the same for these. They should all be reconsidered in the scope of the existing docket. And the other thing that concerns me about this process is that we have the applicants that go through the docketing process in a regular year have to go through a pretty rigorous process, whereas in a major plan update, we've allowed a lot of these applications to roll in during the comprehensive plan update for property-specific amendments.
I hate to interrupt you again, but we do have 3 minutes left.
And so, as a result of allowing these property-specific requests to come rolling in, it has lengthened out the Planning Commission process. It has burdened staff because we haven't formally docketed them. And so I can foresee the same thing happening again. So I would like items like SV1 pulled from the comprehensive plan. They do not need to be in the language, and then put through a docketing process.
Are you in support of the Planning Commission recommendation or no?
They want to defer consideration. I don't want the language in there. So no, I am not supportive of the Planning Commission recommendation.
We have PC for Freed, Lamb, and Agnew. Others? Councilmember Evans?
Well, I'm trying to understand Councilmember Sandberg's reasoning. If pulling them, to me, is the same thing as deferring them. You're just delaying the discussion on this.
But I don't want the language in the comprehensive plan at all, because then what that does is it gives it preference over other items that are going through a formal docketing process. So when we considered the entire docket, Nike Hill rezone was never part of that request. And so it's impossible for us to have a cumulative assessment.
I'm in favor of deferring these because of the complex issue involving these, and look at them at a later date.
Okay, so you're in favor of a change?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes?
I'm in favor of the change, too. I think deferring them and having them docketed is appropriate.
Well, let's make this clear, because the actual language PC recommendation is to defer further consideration of the proposals. So is that what you're saying? You're in favor of deferring as the Planning Commission has recommended?
Yeah, but I guess I'm not clear on why there's an issue with that from Councilmember Sandberg. Is it because it's in the comp plan then, so they don't pay their fee to have it considered? Or?
It's placeholder language that the Planning Commission has determined is a priority to be heard, not the council.
Oh, that's not okay. Yeah, I'm not okay with that.
Okay. So, Deputy Mayor?
I'll go with the PC recommendation.
Okay, so that's PC recommendation on the Shelton View item. David, we continue on.
We have all of these changes that our member of the audience has suggested. So maybe I would suggest that staff can incorporate these changes into a matrix format so that we can consider them next week?
I thought you just said that you didn't like the idea of things being thrown in at the last minute because they haven't gone through the full vetting process because it adds to staff time.
Well, point taken, but are we not?
20 seconds.
Are we not going, but are we going to just say thank you for participating, public, but we're not going to,
I think we're going to deal with the items that were on our agenda for tonight, and this was presented to us as tonight. We have a meeting next week as well. So I'm happy to take this material home and look at it, but I'm not.
And that was my suggestion.
Let's read this without having to add it to anything. We're trying to make progress through this and get to a place where we are passing this next week. So on to the next item. It's Country Village, Lake Pleasant, Bothell, Everett Highway sub-area. RAC designation has been recommended by the Planning Commission. I am certainly in favor of the Planning Commission's recommendation. Others?
I am as well.
Okay.
I'm as well.
Anyone else? Yes? PC. Councilmember Rayom or Sandberg?
I'll go with PC on this one.
Okay. Councilmember Sandberg? Abstain? So there's 6 with 1 abstention. Next is Canyon Park sub-area. Planning Commission recommendation assigning the RSC designation to the Canyon Park sub-area. I'm in favor of the Planning Commission recommendation. Others?
As am I.
Yes. Councilmember Agnew, Lamb.
Myself.
Yes. Spivey, Evans, Rayum, abstain. So 6-1. So we find ourselves back at the Waynita Simons Norway Hill sub-area item.
Mr. Mayor, can I address this? I actually think that a senior housing overlay here would provide less of a traffic impact than either 7200 or 9600. I mean, that said, I'm sensitive to the idea of upsetting the plan by pushing us back. So, I mean, I support the Planning Commission recommendation, and I would support having this considered, assuming that staff believes that we're not able to, that this would delay us in our consideration of plan. If we can't do it, then I support the Planning Commission recommendation.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Evans.
I think the senior housing overlay is certainly something to consider, not only for this property, but along that stretch of East Riverside Drive. Unfortunately, this is not the right timing to do that now because of the SEPA process. So I will recommend, or I will support the Planning Commission recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Or Evans and then Mr. Agnew. Others?
In consideration of SEPA, I will support the original recommendation.
Okay, Spivey's PC. Councilmember Rayam or Sandberg?
I'll support the PC recommendation.
Okay, Councilmember Sandberg? Abstain. Okay, so you have your majority vote for Planning Commission recommendation. So we've made it through the 2 items of which you've recommended we address first. So let's jump back up to page 1 and see what progress we can make in the next scheduled 10 minutes for this discussion. One would be you added in conversation around SP1. Don't know that there's any conversation necessarily to have here one way or the other. But my hope and plan would be that we come to next week with a vote to approve the changes. So any other comments on that? Councilmember Rayam?
Sorry, let me log in real quick. I did have a comment that I needed to ask about this.
Can I have a question of staff?
Yeah.
So, Dave, is it your position that since we're not doing this 70, so we're sticking with 7200 on that that this is no longer an issue?
As far as that recommendation, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we don't see any other
others that would present an issue. Okay.
Okay. Great. Can we move on?
I just wanted clarification on that. So it says in general, any proposed change to the PC recommendation that would increase the intensity or density of the plan reviewed as part of the MDNS. Does that just mean if we upzone something from what the PC recommendation was? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So VS and V1 were removed. I actually am supportive of V2. VS2, I don't know why we wouldn't mention the colleges. Is there a reason you withdrew it? Councilmember Sandberg.
Because I think it's a minor word change, and up until this point, we haven't had any time to discuss it, so I felt like it wasn't worth arguing over, and there wasn't any support, and so
Well,
I had other issues that was more pressing.
Yeah, so I would actually like to retain that suggested change. So that's one vote. Is anybody else willing to support
I would as
me in
well.
that? Would you support where you originally were?
Yes.
Okay, anyone else?
I support it.
Yes, 5, 6. So we have 6.
And I should have mentioned that on those withdrawn items, a number of those we consider kind of housekeeping items,
Okay.
things that we overlooked that we will go ahead and do. So.
So land use element LU1 is this TDR background language is too wordy and complex, Councilmember Sandberg said. I am in favor of standing with the Planning Commission recommendation. Any others?
I am as well. I think transfer development rights is very important, and it's something that we need more of, not less of. It can help in areas like Wayne Golf Course.
Others? Councilmember Ram?
I support this. I just hope that we could, and I think this will come back, but a TDR that's actually set up for receiving and sending areas within the city of Bothell is something I would prefer.
Absolutely. Great. Others? Councilmember Evans?
Well, on the comments from the staff that the background language could be edited to be less wordy and complex, is that going to happen then?
If we're directed to do so, we can bring that back.
So the staff is okay with the Planning Commission recommendation? Okay. Okay, fine. I can support the Planning Commission recommendation.
Okay, so we've Agnew?
I'd be supportive of the Planning Commission, but I also would like the background language edited to make it less wordy and complex.
Okay.
I support what Councilmember Agnew said, and as well as what Councilmember Rayum said about trying to keep our TDRs within the city.
Okay. David, do you feel clear on that now?
Yeah, we can. I think we'd like to bring back proposed language on if that is the consensus of council.
The consensus was Planning Commission support, but if there's changes to make it more simplified in the language, yep. Okay, LU2 through LU13 were withdrawn. Anybody want to keep any of those in that weren't? Okay, so LU14, this is stormwater is pressing issue. This is put forward by Regent Wood Owner Association. Councilman Rayum, you want to speak on this? You're a little bit more in depth with the stormwater issues.
Let me just read this again real quick, see what it says.
So for the listening audience, this is LU14. Stormwater is a pressing issue for the city, and the city should take no land use actions until badly out-of-date 1994 Stormwater Comprehensive Plan is updated. This is from Regent Wood Owners Association. So our staff's come back and said the GMA requires the land use element to review drainage, flooding, stormwater runoff in the area of nearby jurisdictions, provide guidance and corrective actions to mitigate, cleanse those discharges that pollute the waters of the state, and goes so on. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. So we are updating our stormwater comprehensive plan. It's in the works. They already had public meetings on it. It's supposed to come to council, I think, this summer.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Right there. Yeah, I support the staff's position on this. I don't see why we would delay the update of the comprehensive plan for that.
Okay, so I'm in support of staff. Staff. Councilmember Sandberg? Staff, so that's 7. LU15 was removed, and then jumping on to the natural environment element, any 1 through 7 was removed. So any 8, where did the removed language go? Councilmember Sandberg, do you want to speak to that?
All of the language was struck from any policy 8, and I think that's good language. And even though it might be taking a belt and suspenders approach, I think it's important to retain that language, and staff felt like that was acceptable.
They didn't feel it was
They did feel it was acceptable to retain the language in NEP 8.
I read this. Retaining the existing language is not necessary.
Keep reading.
Very end, next page.
Oh, there's another page.
Mr. Mayor, if I might
Yes,
speak to this. My sense is, I literally have a difficult time carrying the comprehensive plan amendment book into there. I think it was a worthy idea for the Planning Commission to reduce language to try to make it more manageable for the average citizen. I don't think this language adds. I think a belt and suspenders approach can lead to a document that's completely inaccessible and unreadable to the average citizen. So I support what Planning Commission did.
Okay, so staff recommendation, Councilmember Lamb. Others? Or not staff recommendation, leaving it as is. So you're for the change. Well, is that right? Is staff? Would you say staff recommendation?
It's
is
the
to
Planning
change it?
Commission.
Essentially, what staff is saying is that this is a policy issue that doesn't have a downside either way you go, frankly, so.
So we'll
can
have
do it
clarity.
tonight.
We're going to support the Planning Commission recommendation, and we're supporting the Sandberg request to retain the language.
Planning Commission.
So, Lamb, going back to you, are you for PC or are you for the retaining the language?
The Planning Commission.
Okay, Councilmember Agnew, and then Evans.
I'd go with the Planning Commission then.
Okay, Evans.
And throughout this entire document, the statement is made to streamline this document, and there's a lot of things that could be in here, but the bottom line is it's we're streamlining the document, and I think this is already covered under the best available science practices. So I think the Planning Commission recommendation is fine.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rayum or Spivey?
PC?
I'd want to leave it in.
Okay. So I think you have your direction. And E9, this is what about Juanita Creek and Swamp Creek?
Yeah, and to make it very simple, this is a situation where staff would say adding Swamp Creek makes some sense, but adding Juanita Creek does not.
And I agreed with that. I have to get to my page. I actually supported several of those changes you apparently made. Let's see. I said, I think just like you, with the staff recommendation, to mention one, not the or leave one, not the other.
I support staff's recommendation to include Swamp Creek, but not Juanita Creek.
Yes. Others? As do you? Staff?
Staff recommendation.
I concur.
Okay. Sandberg? Okay. So that's 7. Any 10? This would be, should Juanita Creek be included in the list? Staff would not recommend at this time to include Juanita Creek with these policies. Anybody wish to make comment?
I support staff's recommendation.
I as well.
Okay. Let's see. Evans, Agnew, Free, Spivey, Raymond, Sandberg.
Could I just ask Councilmember Sandberg just quickly why you wanted Juanita Creek added to NE10?
It was the same question I had about Swamp Creek, but they answered it in NE9, and I thought I had removed NE10 and 11 from consideration, so I thought those were shaded, but I guess. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's
so those
7.
should be shaded.
Those should be shaded. Okay. What about 11? Is that shaded or staying in?
Shaded.
Yes, Bruce.
Maybe not.
Mine didn't get updated that way. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
What?
We may have made a mistake there.
No.
So any 11 is shaded?
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
As is 12, 13, 14, and 15. 16?
So this speaks to the language, and this is what Councilmember Rayum has talked about, is that we shouldn't just protect and preserve what we have. We should improve on the resources. That improving should be a goal, not just protecting the degraded situation that we have.
Okay. Bruce?
Yeah, this is, again, one of those things where it's kind of the council's choice if they want to go with it.
Yeah, I have no issue with this change.
I support it.
Evans?
I don't support the change because I like the Planning Commission recommendation just as is, because I know Councilmember Ream had some good ideas about how we protect these streams, but we're we were less than 1% of the drainage basin or something like that, and I don't know how we improve. I'm fine for doing what we can in our own city, but I don't know how we improve this entire, the
Well,
water
let me ask
quality,
clarification for myself. I look at the slough, which is now the Sammamish River. It's a slough for 35 years of my life, right, Councilmember Agnew? It's degraded to such a point that there are opportunities to improve it. That's why I don't take an issue with it.
I
mean,
agree.
if extreme has been degraded and then a development comes in next door, there's potential to improve that development, even going up North Creek or Horse Creek or whatever it might be.
But I think if you read the language, it says what the Planning Commission determined is the city should implement an objective of no net increase in pollutant loads to these water bodies as they pass through the city. That would mean that they would come into that the water would leave the city the same way as it came, no worse than it came into the city. That's an incredibly aggressive standard to get to that. And while you might want to say we would like the water that comes from 98% of the stream until it arrives in Bothell to be cleaner when it leaves Bothell and goes into Kenmore in the Sammamish River, I don't think that's real. I don't think that's realistic. I think what you want to say, that would mean that we wouldn't, the Planning Commission policy would be we would not add a single drop of pollutants into that water as it meandered its way through the city of Bothell. That's an incredibly aggressive standard to say we actually want to take pollutants out of the water that other people have put in the developed jurisdictions outside of our body of waters. I think it's great to be aspirational, but I think the Planning Commission is being eminently realistic, and that's why I agree with Councilor Evans.
Others?
So I can speak to this. We have a lot of regulations, especially when it comes to redevelopment, that we do reduce the amount of impacts just by the nature of our code as it stands. And so also just adding the statement that you want to improve your water bodies will pay dividends in grants and regional funds to actually help you do projects along these streams. So there's a definite possibility to improve water bodies within the city. So I don't see why we wouldn't. We have regulations that they're making us do it anyways, essentially.
So if you could answer Councilmember Lamb's statement, if it's a stream or a river coming in from outside the city that's at level whatever, he's saying how can you improve what's already coming into you at that level? It's just maintaining it to say don't create worse through the city.
So yeah, how can I do this? I get technical when I start talking about these things, but for the most part, I have seen streams actually become improved as they travel through cities. The Sammamish River specifically, I've seen it. So I have data for as it passes through the city of Redmond, just because that's where I work. And I can tell you that because of the projects we've done and the efforts we've lowered the temperature of that river from when it came into the city to when it leaves. So it's absolutely possible. It's just a matter of making some choices about what you're going to do. And if you have that in your comp plan that you intend to improve, then you can put that in every grant application you have, and you will draw regional funds to help you accomplish that goal. If you don't, then you're at a loss compared to all the cities like Redmond that will have that in their comp plan, and they will put it in their grant, and they will get the money.
So I have to remind myself, because I was slow in taking notes, I heard Evans say PC recommendation, Lamb say PC recommendation, Agnew say add the word improve, Rayum add the word improve, is that correct? Councilmember Sandberg improve.
I supported the change.
And to improve, as do I. So that's 5-2. NE 17 should mention WIRA 8 Salmon Recovery Council. I'm not in support of that change, so I'm staying with PC. Others? Sandberg?
I would support the change. I think this is an example where you can add a little bit of language. It doesn't contradict anything. It's not an untrue statement. Staff says that mentioning the WIRA 8 plan is an acceptable addition because the reader of the document isn't going to know to go to the WIRA 8 plan or our interlocal agreement. They're going to read at face value what they see in that policy statement. And so adding that language there, I think improves readability because then the reader doesn't have to go to some other reference document to know that that is the case.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Agnew? Change or PC? change. Evans?
So I want to be clear, so what are we adding here? Because we've already have the YRA 8 in there, so as stated, we mentioned of the YRA 8 plan is an acceptable addition to what we already have? I'm not, help me understand that.
So I'm pretty sure Y rate's in there in other locations. I think this is just in regards to any 17.
So how would it read then?
I don't have any 17 in front of me. Does
The Planning Commission recommendation retained the general language which states the city's continued intention to participate in local and regional salmon recovery efforts, and the YRA 8 plan is an acceptable addition? We already have it in there. Guess I'm just trying to understand what the language would be.
Sounds like you are in favor of the PC recommendation.
Bruce, can you bring it up?
Or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, essentially what the PC recommendation would be is just to participate in local and regional efforts. It doesn't specifically identify the YRA 8 plan. And our thought was throw the YRA 8 plan as part of those local and regional efforts.
Okay. So, in the effort of...
So, being the vice chair of YRA 8, I'd like to leave or add YRA 8 into that.
Okay.
We also participate on the Puget Sound Salmon Recovery Plan as well, but
I don't have an objection to adding it.
I'm going to support the vice chair of YRA 8 on this one.
Oh,
I support the change.
All right, so moving on to 18. Listen, we're already past our time, but we are making progress. So with everybody's indulgence, let's try to see if we can complete this by 9:30 and then go into our executive session. All right, so any 18. I'm fine with the word change to encourage. Anyone else?
I favor encourage.
Okay, Lamb.
I'd support the change.
Change. Sandberg.
I'd support require instead of encourage.
Okay, so you want to change the change. Others? Councilmember Spivey or Evans?
Sounds like it's a moot point, so required, I'll support required.
You want required?
Well, I'm looking at, it's going to be required anyway in the comments.
yeah, if I could just speak to it, that's why I put it in there, because literally in less than one more year, it will be required. So to say you encourage it when it's required, it seems kind of odd for a 6-year plan.
Bruce?
I mean, either way works fine. The only issue with required is it would put a little bit of an onus on us that maybe we should implement it earlier. And it's going to be all we can do just to get that thing going.
Yeah, I just say that's not the intent of my change. My recommendation wasn't to do it sooner. It's just that you have a 6-year plan that says you'd encourage something that's required.
Exactly, yes. And we do have a deadline, absolutely.
So I'm going to go back to, so for clarity, I would like people to say whether they like to change to require or stay with Planning Commission recommendation. For me, I want to stay with the Planning Commission recommendation.
Planning Commission recommendation.
Encourage.
So,
Planning Commission recommendation. Okay? Councilmember Spivey?
So I would just want to be clear, what I'm hearing is in 16, when we make the changes in that manual, it'll say required then, correct?
That's correct.
And I don't want to be misleading between now and then. And I don't want to put us on I'm going to stick with encourage until then, because I don't want the idea that we're trying to implement earlier.
Okay. So I have Freed PC, Lamb Freed PC, Evans PC, Spivey PC. Go ahead.
Require.
So we have a change to require.
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 No, of course I want require.
Require. Okay. So we'll stay with Planning Commission recommendation NE 19. I'm recommending staying with Planning Commission, or my vote would be, or my support is. Others?
I support the Planning Commission recommendation.
Lamb, okay. Others?
I support the PC.
Spivey is PC.
I'm a reasonable kind of guy.
Evans says what?
I'm a reasonable kind of guy.
You're reasonable, meaning?
Planning Commission.
Planning Commission, okay.
The original language, I believe, said all options Planning Commission changed it to all reasonable options, so I support changing it to the original language, which is all options.
Okay, thank you.
I'd support all options.
All options. Councilmember Rayam?
I support all options just because the reasonable ones would prevail.
Okay, so that will stay at that, Bruce?
So that was all options?
Oh. Nope. I heard Freed was reasonable. Lamb was reasonable. Spivey, did you say reasonable? You said PC. And Evans said PC.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's 4 to
I
3.
had 3, that's okay. Thank you.
Any 20? I am
Actually,
staying with PC recommendation.
We actually addressed that a little bit earlier. That was an item that was repeat.
Oh, so we're okay? We can take this out?
Yep. PC
Okay.
recommendation.
This is any 21, require best management practices and give special consideration to the fisheries. The Planning Commission recommends implement site design, construction, and maintenance practices that incorporate best management practices for fish and wildlife. I'm staying with the best practices.
I support that.
As do I.
Evans, Agnew, Rayum, Spivey, Freed. Actually, I said Rayum. I shouldn't have, but there's 5 at this point who've spoken. Rayum and Sandberg. Fine. Rayum, that's fine. 22. I'm recommending staying with the Planning Commission recommendation. Freed. Others?
Planning Commission.
Rayum?
I like the staff's recommendation to put a specific policy in the comprehensive plan about lot clustering and bring it back to the council for consideration, with the focus of it being to preserve and protect and improve surface waters.
Councilmember Sandberg.
Well, that is a big issue that I would prefer to go through the docketing process so that we can understand cumulatively what changes we want to consider next. However, I do agree. So that said, I agree in concept with this idea of either looking at a clustering ordinance, reviewing our PUD ordinance, because what we're doing in this whole plan process is we're continuing to upzone properties. And where we used to have properties developed under a PUD where you had smaller lots and the provision of open space or parks or different amenities, now all we're getting is greater intensity. And it's because people who have property that's zoned 9600, they don't have the flexibility that we used to have to make lot sizes smaller while providing these amenities. And so instead of having property zoned R9600 with the potential of them using a PUD process, now we are in a situation where the PUD process is inflexible, and so as an alternative, we're zoning it to R7200 or R5400 or whatever. And I feel like we're losing an opportunity, and so I would support conversation in the docketing process, investigating that further and what form that might take.
So were you for the staff change or no? Or the PC?
So the staff change was to recommend the creation of a specific policy. And I would like that idea, although that contradicts my position that we should be docketing these items as opposed to putting them on the comprehensive plan as placeholder language.
So, okay. We never know.
Staff's recommendation.
Okay. We're probably going to need your vote. Spivey or Evans?
I'll go with staff recommendation.
Well, if the staff thinks that they can create a specific policy with corresponding action, which identifies future effort to consider clustering, I'm fine with that. I do think this is a big issue that's going to take some time to look at, but if staff feels that they can do that, I can support the staff recommendation.
Is this causing any issue for SEPA?
No, no. What this is one of those policies and actions that would be a future action activity.
Okay.
So we don't have to worry about that in SEPA.
Okay. Any 23?
So actually, I hadn't had a chance to speak on that.
You
Maybe
did.
they were already.
You said you were for the PC recommendation.
Okay. I said that wasn't what I intended to say.
Okay, well, what would you like to say?
So the staff recommendation, just so I'm clear, because I was conflating the staff recommendation and the planning commission recommendation. The staff recommendation is to draft essentially a clustering ordinance. Is that correct?
He's putting his hand up and saying, well, that
that's
is
right.
not.
The idea is to establish a policy and an action that would say we would look at that type of an approach. I don't have a time frame, frankly, but we would put it into the comp plan that would give us the ability to start that as a code amendment process.
Yep.
Okay, just want to clarify that.
So what are you saying? Still with the PC? It's
I'll
passing.
stick with the. Well, then you don't need my vote, as Councilmember Sandberg would say.
Want to move on, or do you have another?
Well, I just want to say if it could come back as part of the LID planning code scrubbing thing that the NPDES stormwater permit requires, I think that would be an appropriate time.
It actually probably will be that time frame, yes.
Okay. So 23, I'm sticking with the planning commission recommendations at this point. But let me quickly look through. Does anybody want to comment right now? PC.
Yeah, planning commission.
PC. So that's 5. Others? Sandberg or Ram? We can move on if there's no comment. Okay. So 24, I'm staying with Planning Commission recommendation.
PC.
As am I.
Okay.
Planning commission.
Okay. So that's the majority of go with PC on 24. You guys were making great progress. We have 9 minutes left and only a page and a half, or 2 pages. 25. We did?
Yeah, we actually, this is, again, one of those repeats, but because it was a different person, we included the issue again, so we probably shouldn't have done that.
26.
Yes.
Same with 26, yes.
And 27.
7, 28, 29,
38.
38.
C?
Yep.
What
All
about
those
ad
are-
policy reason lead-free activities?
So,
New one.
I had brought that up in the original matrix. I had thought about it I thought about placing it in the shoreline master plan, but staff said that that was not an option. And so I did not want to let the issue die because I think this issue came up with the potential application of the gun range and the gun range within our city limits and the extensive Seattle Times series on the hazards associated with shooting ranges, especially related to their leaded ammunition. I think this is an important issue for our environment, for water quality, for air quality. And I think it's really important that we have some kind of policy language that requires lead-free activity, whether it's, I'm thinking of a gun range, there might be other uses that have lead in their process. But I think this is very important. If you read the Seattle Times series, I was impressed by the level of pollution that happens, the health impacts, and the fact that these businesses are not monitored. So if you expect that there's going to be some kind of monitoring system that's going to prevent this from happening, it's not there. And then what happens is we, as a city, will probably inherit a huge liability 10, 20 years from now when the gun range is no longer profitable or is so toxic that it needs to be vacated. And I just don't want to have the city be in the liability situation that it is, like with gas stations and dry cleaners, like it is today. I see this as being the cleanup issue, the dry cleaner cleanup issue in the next 10 to 20 years, and a terrible public safety hazard.
Okay, so everybody's comment should be to add this or not add this. Councilmember Evans?
How does this affect the SEPA process?
It probably does not, because it's not really one of those things that has an intensity or density kind of a provision. It's one of those items that would say it's kind of along the lines of an air pollution type of a policy.
So the recommendation is to add a policy reference lead-free activities. I guess, personally, if I could see something the staff would bring back for our next meeting to draft that might be helpful to see what that would look like for me.
Okay. Mr. Spivey?
I won't be supporting this. We, for the reason of the Wildlife Committee of Washington and their Kenmore gun ranges, plays a vital role in our public safety, and that is in part of our GMA area, and I don't want to lose something that King County couldn't even get rid of that was the original site for Brightwater, and it was found to be too vital to public safety as a firing range for our police officers, and I don't want to put something in place that could hamper public safety, so I won't be supporting it.
Okay, Councilmember Agnew? Add or don't add?
Well, I'd support it, but I think when the gun range came and gave us their presentation, they talked about it being lead-free, and they talked about controlling the lead. I still would be in support of this. I'll just leave it at that.
Interesting. Councilmember Lamb?
I guess I'm kind of at a loss in that I don't know what this would be if we're saying that we don't like lead. I'm all in favor of putting it in there. If it's just a general statement in our comprehensive plan that lead is not a good thing, completely. If we believe somehow that this will prevent the gun range that is currently going in and is permitted, is that the goal?
The gun range could operate if it used lead-free ammunition.
So we would go to them. Well, I'm just trying to understand this. So we would go to them and say, our comprehensive plan prohibits you from using leaded ammunition in your current business, and if you don't comply with our comprehensive plan, we will close you down? Is that the goal that we would be using? I'm just not understanding the connection between this and a potential.
The goal is to require lead-free, whatever it is. I'm thinking about it. Obviously, we're thinking about it in terms of a gun range, but it is to promote lead-free activities. And ironically, it is a public safety issue because in that Seattle Times series,
so getting back to my question,
fire marshals,
getting back to my question,
fire marshals won't use.
I had the floor. Getting back to my question, which was not about the Seattle Times article, I would support a code language to address lead poisoning or lead pollution if we think that that's an issue. I don't think that this is appropriate. I think at this late stage, I don't think just like a single sentence on lead-free is going to be. I'm not.
And just so you know, this isn't late stage. I gave my comments, and this was one of them months ago. So this isn't late stage.
Thank you. Continuing on in efforts to move forward, I am not in support of this change. If we're talking about the gun club that did come in, he specifically said that new ammunition is not being made with lead. They're circulating lead out of the system. He did say they do have a system to treat every bullet as if it is lead. That's shot into whatever they shoot into. It drops into a pan. That pan then through some form of water circulation or something goes into a bin, then it is sealed with people with gloves and they take it out. So they treat every bullet as if it is a lead bullet, and I see it as a wonderful way to get lead out of our system by creating a place to literally collect it through entertainment, for the lack of a better word. So I am not in favor of adding this in. Councilmember Rayum.
I'd be in support of staff bringing something back to let us take a look at it.
Okay, so at this point there is no clear direction, so that would die on a non. The direction is we have Councilmember Spivey, that was no add, Freed was a no add, Lamb was a no add. I had an affirmative add from Sandberg and an affirmative add from Rayum. We had two people that were indifferent, which is not clear. Okay, so that's you. That's 3-3. So Councilmember Evans, you were a maybe.
I was asking, I'm not, until I see a policy drafted here or something, I'm not going to approve. So I asked that the staff bring back something for us to look
Okay,
at.
so it sounds like people could bring
that's
back
what Andy-
language.
Filing on with him.
Okay, so bring back language for that. Shorelines element, SM1 through 5 has been removed. Historical preservation has been removed. Urban design element, folks are doing well. Is UD1. Let me, oh shoot, I packed up my. Does anybody want to make comment while I look for my notes? Sandberg?
So this is the very important issue that many members of the public brought forward regarding the cut-through traffic and street connectivity. That particular language was struck from every sub-area plan, with the exception, I believe, the downtown plan where it doesn't exist in the first place, and also in the transportation element. And so their request was to restore that language.
Is that your position as well?
Yes.
So you want to, I'll say, restore language or PC recommendation. So
PC recommendation was to strike the language, and then, so I'm...
you're restore it, I'm saying, so the people's decision tonight is restore or PC. Others?
I'd go with the Planning Commission.
Okay. Mr. Evans?
Yes, I would go with the Planning Commission because this does not say that we're going to have a grid system, and it's eliminating the sub-area plans does not reduce the protections or create any more room for interpretation of the policy and regulations. So I'm fine with planning. We're not doing what the public was concerned about.
Excellent, thank you. Mr. Lamb, Ram, or?
Still cogitating.
Mr. Ram?
I'd restore it and not follow the PC recommendation.
Okay. Deputy Mayor?
I guess I'm indifferent at this point.
Okay, so I'm for the PC, so it comes down to Spivey and Lamb. Right now we have Sandberg restore, Rayum restore, Agnew, Evans, and Freed PC. Anybody have Jeopardy music?
The net effect is the same either way, so I'm indifferent. So.
Okay, are you indifferent as well?
No, I'm not indifferent. I think that there's. I mean, let me just ask staff this question: the PC, as it's articulated right now, you're saying that you are eliminating provisions that have prevented logical neighborhood connections. That those are only going to be internal to neighborhoods. They're not going to be ones that would allow people to cut through and get to a connector street.
Yeah. For example, the connection that was recently made between Parkhurst and North Creek Heights.
So just for example, like on 242nd, would the policy have been not to connect that street, or would it have been to allow it to be connected? Yeah, with the Planning Commission change.
242nd was an existing street where we blocked access.
But were we going back to pre-242nd being built, that development?
That I think it would have been have been an analysis of whether that was a direct enough path to have increased cut-through traffic on neighborhood streets, cut-through traffic that was originating from an arterial and going to another arterial that wasn't, internal neighborhood traffic.
Okay, I think I'm going to stick with the language that we had.
I'm going to go.
With PC?
You want the PC recommendation?
No, I think I'm going to stick with the language that we had.
So restoring it.
So
yeah, I'm going to say restore. I just listening to Dave and yeah.
Okay, so that's 4 for restore, 3 for PC recommendation. Transportation element, the PC recommendation was based upon staff analysis. This is regards to the GMA requires that mitigated actions be included in the 6-year capital. I'm staying with PC recommendation.
Is this TR1?
TR1.
So I believe the staff comment is that the legislature did not revise the time limit for concurrency. So if the Planning Commission changed it from 6 to 10 years, then isn't 10 years inconsistent?
We're recommending going with the 6-year as.
So I recommend the 6 years.
Sandberg, 6. 6. 6.
6.
6. It's becoming a theme.
6.
Okay, so TR2, concurrency corridors do not include several arterials that have high congestion and seen on increased commercial traffic. Concurrency corridors will be addressed on June 9th. So what decision is there for us to do here, David?
Well, the recommendation was that that the appropriate action would be to do the studies that were discussed. But I'll let Steve elaborate on that.
Yeah, and I think the intent of our presentation was to kind of inform you that just by applying concurrency wouldn't address probably the situations because a lot of them were access issues. So what we're recommending is basically listening to the council, and we'll come back and give you the top 5 priorities and what we would recommend and how to move forward in studying those and trying to improve those situations.
Great, thank you. Well, it's been a good discussion as we've gotten through the matrix. There are 2 items that are going to be coming back next week, from my understanding. One is the Shelton view. We have the green paperwork that was handed to us, as well as the second item was the language for lead. I heard no other thing. Councilmember Ram?
About TR3.
Oh, thank you. Good. Is that what you were going to bring up?
No, we haven't done TR3.
We haven't done
We haven't done
TR3.
TR3 yet. It's on our
Oh, for
matrix
crying
here.
out loud. You're right. TR3, the last item. Treatment of medians, specifically, this Councilmember Ram brought up. Landscape medians and stamped concrete. I am in favor of the PC recommendation. I think it gets difficult if you plant medians throughout the city and have to maintain them. I think that becomes a challenge. We can have planted medians in, high pedestrian areas and where areas that our staff deems feasible. Mr. Agnew is PC, Rita's PC, Lamb.
PC because you can't put yard signs in a concrete median.
That's funny. Others, PC or change?
PC.
PC.
Oh, I want it changed. I just think those. I'd rather just don't put a median in. Just put a bump in whatever the divider is in the middle of the road, instead of a concrete stamped ugly medians that we've been building. They just look horrible. And I've maintained
Holding back
medians.
your feelings. So.
Well, and I've maintained medians as a whatever landscaper, and it's not that bad.
Okay, Mr. Evans.
Don't like them, but they are safer and they require less maintenance. Converted landscape medians to concrete. Try to be creative here and keep costs low. So, what I'm saying is, I don't like them, but I think I've maintained them and had many cars go through them, and it's a mess to maintain them. They look better. I don't like the concrete, but I'd like to do what we can to improve that. There's got to be some creative way of making concrete look good out there. I'm not sure what it is.
Stamped concrete.
Andy's got it.
Well, we need a standard.
What?
We need a standard specification for our medians.
Well, I'm going to stay with concrete right now, but I'm asking that somebody be creative here and look for a nice-looking concrete median.
We
That's
do
safe.
we've had standards that we've implemented throughout the city that have been put forward. I think SAD maybe was one of the originals, but is that right, Dave?
Yeah, we do have some standards. We don't have the ones that Councilmember Ram showed in the photos of were medians that were originally intended to be landscaping. The project didn't have the funds to do the landscaping, so that was done as a temporary measure. And could be replaced so that wasn't. We don't have a standard for the full concrete median.
So you have a majority support. Do you want to speak to it at all? No. Okay. Well, you're allowed to speak even when there's a majority and minority. Okay. So I personally think it's been a productive conversation. Councilmember Sandberg, you may be frustrated, but actually supported many of the items that you brought forward. Just like a public process, some things we want to see supported aren't, others are. So I think overall this is a productive conversation. I'd like to have a motion to 10:30. Wes, you want some clarity before you do? Yes, sir?
Well, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I mean to continue this meeting, public hearing to next week? So I'd move to continue this public hearing to next week.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So there you go.
And I just did want to point out that Bruce noticed that the West Hill property owner initiated amendments somehow didn't get into the matrix, so we'll be bringing those back to
Okay,
you.
so that would be the third item, and then we can discuss those and move to vote at our next meeting, which is great. So, council, we need a motion to 10:30.
Move to extend the meeting to 10:30.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So 6-1. We're going to be going into executive session till 10:30. Don't expect any action after that hour to discuss personnel matters. Thank you.
Never seen Pepper, but he's not
I'm not sure you're dead yet.